Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of double features dedicated to programming the finest, most eclectic, and downright bizarre film pairings and cataloging the discussions that ensue. We're your gruesome twosome, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
And here we are for episode 81. Going to tackle two movies today. You saw it in the title.
We're finally out of the 90s.
Finally out of the 90s.
Escaped the 90s.
Yeah. We'll be dipping back there before you know it, believe it or not. But we're firmly in the 80s and the 2000s on either side of the 90s with the Untouchables. Thank you, Untouchable, from 1987 and Public Enemies from 2009. As we mentioned on last episode, these are not the bonus episode with Geraldo Rivera, of course, but the one before that.
And if you didn't listen to that, go back and listen to that, because I'll just say I've been listening back to it. Now, of course, without watching it again with it, but wow, that was a great episode. I'm just going to say a lot. I think we did well, just going to say.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Pat ourselves on the back with that, but better than he did.
Yeah. But again, these movies we're talking about today are ones that have been on our list for quite a while since the beginning of this podcast. We don't really like either one of these movies.
No, because that was the thing. Both these movies suck, and they're very well beloved, so let's take them down.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And I think
here we are.
I think for us too, because we see bad movies and you're like, whatever, and you move on, and it doesn't even feel like a grievance on your part. Yeah. But these movies are ones that are particularly frustrating, I think, for us because of our love for the crime genre, for gangster movies, and they're very bad attempts to live within that tradition.
Well, I also used to love both of them also when I was younger, so it's like, we need to finally come to terms with this crap.
Yeah.
And they're both from two relatively overrated filmmakers. I wouldn't say totally, but relatively overrated, of Brian De Palma and Michael Mann.
Both good in their own ways.
Yeah,
but
Michael Mann, I think, being the superior of the two. But it hasn't made as many different types of movies.
I was going to say he's going to have a smaller sample size.
Because De Palma was a maximalist not only in his style but also in just the amount of movies he made was high. But yeah, so they work well together. I think of tonally deaf movies, but in different
especially
ways.
Untouchables.
Yes,
I think even more so than Public Enemies.
But Public Enemies has its own problems, and we'll get into that. We don't have a Blue Plate special today.
No, we've both been very busy. Haven't had the time to really see many new things or different things. However, there's not a lot of new stuff coming out in theaters right now.
Yeah.
To begin with, anyways, so there's some stuff on the horizon.
Not only even because of the strike, just in general, that's just the case.
And neither one of us are really watching any new television either, other than like Big Brother, which we.
No, I mean I'm still wanting to start This Fool, but every time I say that title, I'm like fool, dead fool.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff I want to watch here and there, but nothing's really going on right now. It's pretty quiet out there overall. But part of that's also because we're not as plugged in because we've both been busy, like I said. So once soccer season's over for me, I guess I'll be able to live again. I don't know. But which I've been loving doing, but it's like, all right,
just
I'm
big commitment.
tired. But yeah, so there's really hasn't been a whole lot going on. I mean, I'm wanting to go try to see The Creator next weekend. I don't know if you care about that or not.
Yeah, I'd
but
mildly
we'll
like to
see.
that,
But just because I don't know, honestly, I just want to go eat some popcorn and see a movie. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, why not?
I guess the last movie, I'm trying to think of the last movie I saw in the theater that wasn't American Graffiti, I guess was Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Yeah.
That's been a pretty long time ago now.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, I mean, yeah, there have been movies that have been canceled or pushed back. But overall, there was just this the September was just pretty empty overall, and there wasn't really anything going on here.
Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be the big release of October.
Yeah.
So I know a lot
And
of people waiting for
we
that.
talked about it, but it thankfully got even more releases than it was going to, and is going to open wider than was originally planned. So,
but yeah, I mean, it's fascinating that we've kind of scratched our head about this last few episodes. I feel like, but this strike is still going.
Yeah,
in a big way. It doesn't really seem like there's an end in sight. So much so that, again, as a wrestling fan, of course, I'm going to bring this up, that The Rock cometh back to SmackDown even,
Yeah.
And that there's all this speculation that he might commit to doing more stuff for the WWE. John Cena's also done the same because, the movies, they're mediocre movies that they both make in Hollywood.
Well, yeah,
not
I mean,
being made right
particularly,
now.
other than even that, though, like, we've seen Black Adam flop in its own way. People didn't really care. Well, I don't know that it was a big flop, but people just didn't really care about it.
I think it was.
Yeah, and then John Cena, I mean, he was in Barbie, but like otherwise, I haven't really noticed him in anything in a while.
It was in that new movie I think that came out on Hulu or something. It was like a comedy sequel that Lil Del Rey Howard, I can't remember how to say his name, was in. I think. But anyways,
yeah, but so. Yeah, they honestly, it's like, yeah, you need to just do wrestling. Like,
they both excel at, but yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
But yeah, I mean, we're getting ready to go around the corner and I feel like hit some more new stuff.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Well, we haven't even been able to watch just regular movies either that we haven't seen or stuff we would normally talk about.
That's one thing, frankly, I love and value this podcast for is that it gives us an excuse sometimes to sit down and watch things together. So otherwise, sometimes we don't find the time to do. So
yeah. One thing we did want to talk about, though, before we get into the Untouchables and Public Enemies is another recent abomination, which is... okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, recently there has been a major issue with Spectrum, other than all the other major issues
between
that always
Spectrum
occur,
and Disney / ABC / ESPN.
Right, and so ESPN and a couple other... I think FX, a couple other Disney owned channels were not on Spectrum for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we totally missed the beginning of college football, which I don't normally care about anyway because I don't really watch a whole lot of college football. But I was more frustrated just because, ESPN, we missed some Monday Night Football. Well, I think it came back right when Monday Night Football, I think the day that Monday Night Football was coming back was when it came back on. But anyway, so I didn't know for a couple weeks because also last week what was I doing last week? I was getting a haircut, and so the College Game Day opening song, the big to your city moment,
to your city,
which has been virtually the same for like 15 years. Is a household classic.
I mean, it's one of those things. Always the first Sunday of college or Saturday, of college football. We always me and you
when
especially
that
huddle
horn,
around
when that bus drives by and that horn honks. Like
we're always like, all right, what's it gonna? We got to hear it again. And they change for years. They change little things, but nothing major.
Mostly some of the footage they show.
Yeah.
And now
it's finally a major revamp.
Lainey Wilson and Darius Rucker, who are both better than Big and Rich.
I want to make that clear in the midst of everything we're about to say. They are actually, especially Darius Rucker, a legitimate, great country act, and Lainey Wilson is on the come up. She's, of course, I think was first known from us through Yellowstone. But has two of the biggest truck songs, "Heart Like a Truck" and then "Wait in the Truck," which she's in.
Yeah.
So let me I want to stress they are objectively a good
Oh,
amount
yeah,
better
definitely.
than Big and Rich.
Well, and
we'll just
also
say.
what I always called Fraggle Rock, whatever all those other weirdos were that were on stage.
And wouldn't you agree? I mean, we genuinely like the original one. Well, when I
Yeah.
say original, there's probably ones before that, but like this one, or the most, the one before
Yeah.
this one. But part of what we liked about it was how overproduced and crazy it was.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's part of what we really.
It was a song that
liked
it was, the
about.
song wasn't all that good, but it got in your head, and it was just catchy. Yeah, I mean,
a bunch of nonsense.
you all know what it is. If you
Yeah.
know, you know. If you know, you know. And I mean, you can find it on YouTube, and that's how we're gonna have to.
Well, I just looked up the new one, and
Imbibe.
I'm going to read some YouTube comments that people
Oh,
left
okay.
behind. Levi's not the only one who's
No,
disappointed,
well, I
just
saw it
say.
for the first time this morning. So you and Dad told me last week when I got home. I was like, "How was it?" Like, it's like I was like a drug addict. I was like,
me just-
how was it? I missed it."
I didn't. Let me just also say, last week, I went downstairs to watch it with my dad. I didn't even have my glasses on, so like I literally
Yeah.
walked down there because I was trying to get down there quick, and I forgot
Yeah.
my glasses, and so I only half saw it and half heard it basically, and I was in a daze anyways. So that was a less than ideal initial viewing of the new College Game Day.
Anyway, I walked down there and sat there and watched it, and all good things must come to an end, is what I said.
Now, when you
immediately
said
it was
that,
done.
that was right after something had been said about Lee Corso. So I
Oh.
assumed you were talking about him for a
that
second.
he died or something.
No,
Yeah,
saying
but-
that like he needs to be like rolled in a burlap
Oh,
sack
no.
and dropped off of like a ledge or
No,
something.
no,
like, I thought that's what you were
I was
meaning.
like, yeah, oh, well, it was a
Because I would argue that's the biggest thing that needs to be settled about College Game Day is his presence.
him. I mean, he's literally like a crueler donut that's been sitting for like 50 years in the sun. That's Lee Corso.
Right.
And even that might have more of an IQ. But it also wouldn't be able to wear all these helmets and all these stupid mascot heads and stuff.
Yeah.
But no, it really was a train wreck disaster, this whole new version.
What
They
about it?
took,
Did you most explicitly react against or to?
Well, the song works, but if the song were different, I wouldn't care so much if it was, so long as it's up tempo, which it is, I think. I don't really remember. But what I liked about it too was all the footage. I mean, it literally was like watching a train go off the rails, like so insane. Like everything, the original ones I'm talking about, just like literal maximal entertainment value of like, look at these big hits. Because it used to be, one thing that changed, you used to show these massive hits and stuff. And then once the CTE stuff became a little more of a thing about 10 years ago, around the time of Tell the Truth, like,
I think I've heard Bill Simmons talk about before, and I'd kind of forgotten that. You remember ESPN used to like have a little like highlight segment called Jacked Up. Like they got jacked up,
Yeah,
and it
and
was like
really
hard
bad
hits, like,
yeah, right.
and now how people roll their eyes at that or laugh at that, or react against that, all the same thing basically in terms of.
And you think about how many people killed their families or whatever as a result of CTE,
and
or themselves or
as what
whatever.
I'd like to call,
Yeah.
I'd like to think of myself as a thoughtful football fan. You're already wincing. I feel like if you're a thoughtful football fan, at watching this as quote entertainment and wondering to what extent am I complicit in these men destroying their bodies for my entertainment, So that's already something that but like you said, they've less
cut that
emphasized
stuff out.
that.
And then it
in
was more of
recent
just
years.
crazy fans or
like crazy catches,
mascots, like
Yeah.
driving go-karts and like,
and also
or like,
clips from
yeah.
game day itself in terms
Right,
of them being on
yeah.
campuses.
And I don't really know how to explain it. It just kind of became a phenomenon in our household over the past 10, 15
and
years.
wouldn't you agree that, like,
And-
hypothetically, not necessarily to me and you, but hypothetically, the appeal of college football is that it's a party atmosphere.
Yes.
Is
And
that's
part of
different
what
than
I
what
don't
professional
like about
football
it.
is,
Yeah. So admittedly, that's part of what I don't like about it. I hate college football fandom.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's one of the most corrosive, racist, sexist, homophobic politically incorrect, idiotic groups of people ever, literally.
But what don't you like about it?
Yeah, I mean, literally, if you could think of everything that's wrong with America, you can find it in college sports.
Everything you just said is true. Yeah. Combine that with the fact that college football itself right now is literally in a tailspin in terms of, like, these combination of conferences and this realignment that's going on. That's most of it makes no sense. College sports in general is in a really bad way. I mean, college basketball, you have even more the one-and-done system where players come for a single season, go and leave, and then there's trying to tell us it's all about the athletics. It's all about the rigor of college, life and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it's not. It's about I've got to play somewhere for a year so I can look great to NBA scouts before I get drafted. I mean, college football is a little different.
Yeah, the NBA loves doing that. They'll pick up somebody in 2 seconds. I mean, because they're all chasing that, like, LeBron and Kobe whole thing of, like, we got them young.
Generational talents.
Right.
Everybody thinks they can be that.
It's just, that's so unrealistic. I mean, because, I mean, you've seen that with college basketball players, but it used to be stuff like even Michael Jordan was so good at UNC. He
was there for like 2 or 3 years.
I know, and that he was already a known commodity in the 80s at Chapel Hill,
Chapel Hill!
And I know that we look back at it now seeing that, but I still feel like with everything I know about Michael Jordan, that was already a thing in the 80s. Like I said, that he's really good, and then did go and become the greatest basketball player of all time, after that, in the NBA for the Bulls. But, you just don't see stuff like that anymore.
I was just looking at Jordan. He went through his junior year. And then
or even you see a lot of these really big basketball players even coming from Eastern Europe now, which is fine, but and that's totally,
valid,
cool, and even ones from Africa we've seen. So,
Giannis,
right, and so, but that's just a totally different system now than what it used to be. As far as the college feeder system is just nonsensical. I mean, and no, don't even get me started on it. All those things I said about college football, I believe truly, but I would watch that any day over college basketball, which I don't think is as bad as that in all of those aspects I mentioned, but because it appeals to a different kind of person usually. But college basketball is literally, to me, the most interminable. You want to get me into seething rage, just let me think about college basketball for about 15 minutes.
In particular, we come from North Carolina. If you know anything about North Carolina college basketball, of course, UNC, Chapel Hill, and Duke.
And then
blood
State
rivals,
is in there
State's
somewhere.
in there, Wake's in there.
Right.
But particularly Duke and Chapel Hill. Around here, when those games are on, almost everything stops in these communities around here. I mean, it's like a big deal. I mean, to the point where I'm not trying to be too overdramatic here, but families are defined by whether or not they're Duke or Chapel Hill fans.
And our family's always overall, as far as our dad's side of the family, been a Chapel Hill fandom because, our uncles went there briefly.
My grandmother was a huge fan. Much so that, this is a whole other side story. We're going off on tangents. I love that even though we don't have Blue Plate Special, we still find things to talk about.
Because, the movies we've got are going to be way worse than any of this.
But, when our grandmother passed away, our dad's mom, back in 2016, this was around March, I think.
It was, I think it was just a little over a year after our great uncle passed.
That me and Levi kind of, were asked to kind of write eulogies to remember her, and then our cousin Tracy Bryant also had one that she wrote, and I think we might have went first, but then she went after us. She was also a big deal because she was the only granddaughter born into the family. It was mostly men. And she very eloquently talked about, Mama and what she meant to her, and particularly Chapel Hill basketball
Right.
as a
Yeah.
and that was one of those things like that was not a I mean, again, this is no criticism,
Yeah.
it's just the difference in things. That for us, me and you, was not a defining aspect of our relationship
No.
with her. But then instantly when I heard her start talking about that, it took me back
And
to
I remember
remembering
that, yeah.
all the years where that
I remember-
was a big aspect.
I remember
of her,
watching
you
her
know.
watch it on TV, and I've never been a basketball fan, even as a kid. I just never have cared about basketball. That's just something that now that I'm into soccer and football, I've always been into football, but now that I'm into soccer, it's like I can't even have time for that. Like so now I'm really not. It's not even that I hate it, but yeah. So yeah, that is something that was sorry. I might have interrupted you, but-
just a defining aspect. And I wouldn't even say this happened within our own family, but I will say this has happened within our own church environment at various
Yeah.
points where people have acted ugly / childish and idiotic over, oh, you're a Chapel Hill fan, oh, you're a Duke fan,
Yeah.
like to the point where I'm like, really, this is going
And
on
we
in a church
both,
setting?
when we,
even,
I
or-
felt like too when we were growing up, we were very lightly Duke fans.
I kind of
me and
was
you,
for a
and-
little bit, just
yeah.
because I was so sick of the Chapel Hill.
Right. Well,
bubble.
no. Listen, I've dealt with so many Chapel Hill fans. Nobody in my family's ever been annoying about it. I don't think as being Chapel
I
Hill
really
fans.
don't think so. Either,
No, but there. Oh my God, I've met so many Chapel Hill fans in my life that are so annoying. But then also the same thing can be said of Duke fans too. So that makes me realize it's like an equation. It's like all this kind of sucks.
And well,
And,
also
you
the
know,
Chapel Hill fans try
Yeah.
to like define themselves by we're a public university,
Right, and Duke is
Duke's
not.
private school.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I've heard some Chapel Hill fans refer to Duke as the University of New Jersey at Durham,
Yeah.
because all the people come from New Jersey that go there. But there's this whole like class element that gets brought into it, and it's like some of the most elitist people I know went to Chapel Hill. Now I know some elitist people went to Duke too, but like we're gonna act like there's a huge difference between people who go to Chapel Hill and people who go to Duke.
Also, you
what
know,
I mean?
another reason too we always talk about this is our great aunt Sarah got a liver transplant from Duke. So I always pull for them off of that too. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, whatever. And if you, and like, I know people can say whatever, maybe that's a dumb reason, but if you can't accept that as a reason, then you're frankly not a human being.
Let's
so it's
all
just like,
admit,
whatever,
we
you
all,
know.
I mean, me and you are
Yeah.
casual sports fans nonetheless. Like, most sport fandoms are born from very arbitrary reasons.
Yeah.
I like the way that uniform looks.
Yeah.
I'm from this area, so I root for this team. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Well,
or
it's
I
like
like
this-
this athlete who went to this team.
Right.
So,
Well,
I
it's-
mean,
it's the
every fandom is born from arbitrary
That's
reasons.
why when I was first watching Premier League a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, and that was after the World Cup, and I was like, oh, I need to pick a team, and I was like looking around, and I was like, well, who does Christian Pulisic play for? Because I was trying to think of Americans that played in the Premier League, and I was
Right.
like, okay, so I looked, and I was like, oh, Chelsea, okay, and I was like, oh, I like their colors, it's blue, it's in London, and then I started watching the other players, and I was like, yeah, and that's why I'm a fan of them.
Yeah.
And now he's not even there, and some of the other players aren't there, and they're doing not that great, but I'm like, well, I'm locked in, that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, right.
But no, it's funny you mentioned that, you know, about college basketball whenever March Madness is going on. It's
I
like,
was going to mention that.
yeah,
here in a
that they
second.
show it at school. Some old,
especially the
grand-
ACC tournament.
Yeah, the
even
ACC
before that.
tournament grandmas with like grandma substitute teachers will come in there and show that, and I remember always being like, I literally don't care about this.
Yeah.
But so it felt great when I was like, we're gonna watch the World Cup in November.
Yeah.
Like, because I just wanted to see the games. Plus, a lot of the kids were asking me. And I was like, my version of that. And it's
Yeah.
like, I knew if somebody would come saying something, I'm like, oh, please. Literally every March, like, it's the same crap. You know?
In
So it's
particular,
just
the
like,
ACC
nah.
tournament was the thing I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
watching a lot of. But the thing about March Madness, and then even also like college football, like, I mean, there are fans I know are real fans and like follow it all, but especially with college football playoff now and the bowl games and the rankings, it's very easy for just random casual people to jump into. And I'm not even saying that totally as a criticism exactly, because I think that's good that sports should try to be accessible to everyone. But, you know, have you done your bracket yet? Like, It's like, no, I don't watch enough college basketball to have an opinion on the Fighting Illini this year. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know or care. And so I feel like college sports just by nature lead themselves off into random people who maybe only care once or twice a year to jump on and have these big, strong opinions.
Right.
And also betting culture is out of control now on all these shows. Yeah. They're talking about what the, quote, over-unders are, like who's favored by so many points. I mean, this is across the board, even professional sports too, that gambling is just now such a big part of why people watch. And then you got fantasy football and fantasy sport. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, you know, sports I feel like are, for a viewer, like radically different than they were even 20 years ago. But, you know, we're old men in a spiritual way. So, didn't like the new intro.
No,
right?
It was a disaster. It was disgusting.
I mean, you would agree that it loosely followed the template set by...
Yeah, but what I always liked about that is it felt very 2000s to me. Like, it still was a lot of the same footage and looked old, and, like, now it's too slick. And, I mean, I think that's also why we love this, is because we knew that someday it would end. It would have to be changed, and they would revamp it, you know.
Yeah.
So by that, it's a natural occurrence that has to happen. But I think, though, that you could do that, but still at least have the song. They didn't have the song.
Yeah.
It's just totally changed.
I'm going to read some of the YouTube comments.
I mean, it's
here.
just like what the, you know, Lou Reed, John Kell song, Forever Changed. So it's just like, it's done now and it's screwed. So,
all right, so some comments.
Yeah,
someone needs to be fired.
Yeah.
Just that simple.
Okay.
Hearing this intro is typically when depression leaves my body. ... Guess I'll go refill my Zoloft after hearing this version. Another one. Some advice for CFB and ESPN. It's not just the words. It's the spirit. Getting with the times. The intensity and cadence of Big and Rich that made it special. This doesn't put as much yin in my yang as past renditions. 2011 clears all others, in my opinion. I love this song, ... with Big and Rich, cry emoji.
Yeah.
Sorry, I love Darius and Laney, but Big and Rich are legends. Sometimes it's just best to leave a classic alone. Hey, here's something that works. Let's screw it up, said Disney and ESPN always.
Yeah.
We'll do a few more here. Big and Rich version was way better, more energetic, plus Cowboy Troy's cool rap break. Can we just get Bubba Sparks back? Back in the Mud is one of the greatest football songs ever made. Big and Rich are missed. Rest in peace. Good and great country music. Again, Darius Rucker is a legitimate modern day, one of the best musicians you can get. So I just want to reiterate. No, he's a huge
he is good,
University of South Carolina fan, I know, because he's from South Carolina, I think. So.
Yeah. Well, a guy that I knew that once had a drink with him one time.
Was
the guy was a student taught with. He used to talk about that all the time.
Didn't you know Charles Barkley a little bit too?
Yeah, he went to school with him. I think,
both went to Auburn.
Yeah, because that's where Charles Barkley went, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so he kind of knew him a little bit. I know he was really good friends with this swimmer that was like
Olympian.
Yeah, and then he was like whenever they'd have the Olympics, he was like one of the main announcers or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember that guy's name. But anyway, he was actually really good friends with him, supposedly. But anyway, yeah. So
speaking of disasters, though, here's the trailer.
Not Randy Duncan's personal life was what we're talking about, by the way. Hey, Randy, if you ever listen to this. But probably not. But, yeah, speaking of disasters.
Here's the trailer for The Untouchables.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood. Sometimes a reputation follows you.
Robert De Niro is Al Capone.
There is violence in Chicago, of course, but not by me and not by anybody I employ, and I'll tell you why, because it's not good business.
Kevin Costner is Elliot Ness.
I have sworn to put this man away with any and all legal means at my disposal, and I will do so.
Sean Connery is Jimmy Malone.
You want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. You just joined the Treasury Department, son. Everybody knows where the booze is. The problem isn't finding it.
Let's do some good!
The problem is who wants to cross Capone.
Somebody messes with me, I'm gonna mess with him.
You carry a badge?
Yes?
Carry a gun.
Get your hands in the air!
You're all under arrest.
You fellas are untouchable. Is that the thing? No one can get to you? Hey, everybody can be gotten to.
All right, then. Drive him to the station. Anything happens, you shoot first. You understand me?
Well, I'll tell you one more thing. You got an all-out prize fight, you wait till the fight's over, one guy's left standing, and that's how you know who won.
Just tell me, are you being careful?
Careful as mice.
I want to hurt the man Malone. I want to start taking the battle to him. I want to hurt Capone.
This man can finger Al Capone. This man can put Capone behind bars.
Well, what's the matter? Can't you talk with a gun in your mouth?
You're not approving your methods. Yeah? Well, you're not from Chicago.
I want you to find this Nancy boy, Elliot Ness. I want him dead. I want his family dead.
Paramount Pictures presents a Brian De Palma film.
I have forsworn myself. I have broken every law I swore to defend. I have become what I beheld, and I am content that I have done right.
You got nothing. Nothing. And if you were a man, you would have done it now.
Never stop fighting till the fight is done.
The Untouchables.
Didn't you think it was so interesting how at the very beginning it defined it as Robert De Niro as Al
Robert
Capone?
De Niro as Al Capone.
Almost like that's what the movie, when they were marketing the movie. Who made this movie again? What studio was it?
It was Paramount.
Paramount. That they knew, that's what people really was probably going to care about, is Robert De Niro as Al Capone. And, De Niro, of course, I love, one of our great actors in any era. I really like him in this movie a lot, so much so that I wish we had more of him, even when he's cartoonish.
Yeah.
I feel like he's
he knows what he's the best thing about
and
the movie.
Also, I mean, he's a master at underplaying things. This is very much like an over-the-top, thing. All right, Levi. What is this exactly?
What is this stupid thing? The Untouchables is a 1987 American crime comedy film. No, just kidding. Crime film. Directed by Brian De Palma, produced by Art Linson, forgot that part, and written by David Mamet. The film is loosely based on the book of the same name from 1957, which was also made into a TV show, of course, and the real-life events it was based on, but most of its plot is fictionalized, as we'll come to talk about later. Stars Kevin Costner, Charles Martin Smith, Andy Garcia, Robert De Niro, and Sean Connery, and follows Elliot Ness, Costner character, as he forms the Untouchables team to bring Al Capone, as we said was De Niro, to justice during Prohibition. By the way, I want to mention, listen to the cast order here. What do you call that? The
top bill,
the billing, yeah.
Order, yeah.
Kevin Costner, right? Obviously, Charles Martin Smith. Somebody was asleep at the wheel here.
Yeah.
Andy Garcia. Okay, yeah. I mean. Robert De Niro, all right, then Sean Connery.
I guess Sean Connery be the and Sean Connery.
Right, but why is Charles Martin Smith second? It's I don't know.
It shouldn't be that high.
He's only in half the movie anyway.
Yeah, he gets killed, obviously.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
He's glorified even in the movie. I mean, he is, but I don't know. That's just stupid. So basically, this movie is essentially just to kind of recap
gotta get Capone.
Here. Is the Al Capone doing stuff 1930, blow stuff up, bootleg booze, get money. Costner, Elliot Ness, Treasury Department man, go try bust up rackets, talk to Connery, beat cop, you got a beef, what is it? Convince to get group they call Untouchable, group of men fight Capone, take down system. Taxes end up being bye-bye.
Blackbird.
Blackbird. No, we're not there yet. People die in process, corrupt government. How what are you prepared to do? That's pretty much
Yeah,
it.
that's a great rundown. Kudos to Levi for
that. Yeah, so basically that, I was going to do a more version of it, but I think that's all I need to say. I want to start with De Niro because we kind of already did anyway. I feel like with this, and also since it's Capone, and we talked about Capone last week.
Did we say anything about David Mamet wrote this too? Also,
well, I did mention it.
Okay,
and we'll get to that in a bit. And we'll talk about De Palma, I guess, in a bit.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll go through the cast quickly. De Niro, now he's on the poster. Obviously,
yeah,
he's got the cigar.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Don't you see him with the sunglasses in this, and you think like Scarface, or rather than literally he was Scarface Al.
Yeah.
As we know. But you think, oh, this is very 80s, even Batman '89 almost version.
We
of the villain,
mentioned Untouchables, or not Untouchables, but Dick Tracy.
Yeah,
watching this too. This is almost Dick Tracy before Dick Tracy.
There's that scene in the movie, and we're going to talk extensively about the Ennio Morricone score because I feel like that's one of the biggest things I remember from the movie, and what ultimately one of multiple things that sinks the movie in a lot of ways. But that there's the part where they're showing his hotel room and all, which I guess is probably the Lexington Hotel for all we know in the movie, I guess. And that the music playing during that scene, and it's got the dwarf bellhop, and he's taking in the newspaper, and you get to see the whole system of what his life is like, and it's all very big and gaudy and ugly, and it reminds me of Scarface kind of as far as the kind of the gaudy colors and but it feels like it's wanting to treat him like that, but don't you feel like the movie doesn't even really have enough De Niro?
That's what I was
obviously
earlier,
what we were saying, but it's maybe we're just beating a dead horse with that because that's obvious. But every scene he is in, you're more oh, okay, you perk up a little bit inherently, even though how stupid it is. You're oh, okay, yeah, and you pay a little more attention.
I think part of that is because, how stale the rest of the movie is. How stale the "we gotta bring him down" section is. And again, I believe in the rule of law, and I believe in criminals should be punished for what they do. So I'm not rooting for De Niro or Capone in this, but as you said, the movie just gets an instant jolt when he's in it. That the rest of the movie is just so kind of stale.
Because I don't. You're gonna hate me for doing this. I don't want to insult Superman, but Costner in this is very much like Superman. I am a crusader,
and he's I am family man,
right? And that's not, and Superman is far more interesting than just that. But I'm just saying that feels like a very 1930s Superman, version of that. Of just that's that whole performance, which we'll get to in a minute. But, which is hardly even as interesting as even a similar performance, but with a lot more teeth of him as Jim Garrison is actually something.
Yeah,
this is the version of that, turned down on the back burner. Basically, it's just nothing. But as far as De Niro. He had worked with De Palma twice before with that movie Greetings, and then Hi Mom in the late 60s,
De Palma also was the one who introduced De Niro to Scorsese.
That's what I was going to say is all of this, he kind of came out of that De Palma origins a little bit and then went on to work with Scorsese, and then he comes back here after De Palma's worked with and would continue to work with throughout with Carlito's Way, but after Scarface with Pacino.
Yeah.
And it feels like, okay, now I've got De Niro. And it's okay, well, what are you going to do with him? You're not doing anything. And so
famously
it feels
also,
like a wasted opportunity.
But should mention Bob Hoskins, as we know, was originally maybe going to do this part.
We just want to add that story in here, actually. And maybe that would be easier that way. We won't have to explain it.
But you almost were cast in the role of Al Capone in the Untouchables movie.
Oh, yeah.
Which would have been a great... De Niro played the part, but you'd have been great doing that.
No, I got a phone call from... I got sent the script of the Untouchables. And De Palma said, take a look at Al Capone and meet me in the bar. So I went to the, whatever, you know, it's this bar, and he said, the first thing he said was, well, really, I want De Niro to play this part. I said, oh, great, I'm glad I can. You know? And he said, but, like, he's a bit difficult to get an answer out of. Now, if he won't do it, would you do it? I said, yeah, if I'm free, yeah. But I ain't holding myself open, like, you know.
Yeah.
So he said, okay. And next thing I know, De Niro's playing the part. I read it in the paper. Well, you know, he got him. Linda and me are sitting there having breakfast one morning. Linda's opening a Post. She said, what's this? And it was a check for $200,000.
To you?
To me.
They sent you a letter with $200,000. Who sent it?
He said, thanks for your time, love, Brian. I phoned him up and said, Brian, listen, you got any films you don't want me to be in, babe? I'm there for you. Any day.
Good work when you can get it.
Yeah.
One of the great stories. Love Bob Hoskins also.
Yes.
He would have been a great Capone, and we have to remember he was Oni Madden in the Cotton Club that same decade. So
he would have been, but I think sometimes there's a natural inclination to say, oh, he would have been even better than De Niro.
No, I don't think he would have been better,
people say that
yeah.
stuff all the time about alternative casting. It's like, I don't think he would have been better. It would have been, you know, basically, the movie's problems would have been the same, whether he was going to be in it or not. You know, and I think he would have been great. But
he would have been, but I feel like he would have actually fit the movie's. And I love Bob Hoskins, but he would have fit the movie's trashiness even more. I feel like De Niro is an attempt to elevate it, and it doesn't. But the scenes are inherently have more juice and more of a lightning in a bottle factor because it's De Niro in the scene.
Another thing is too about the De Niro scenes is that he's not really playing off any other stars.
No, he's just
it's
there.
like he is by far the biggest presence in the scene, whereas all the stuff with I actually think a lot of the stuff, even though I have problems with Connery's performance in parts, the stuff with Costner and Connery are the heart of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately some of the best and also some of the worst stuff about the movie are their relationship and that passing of the torch that's kind of happening between them over the course of it. So, I mean, that's the real beating heart of the movie. And the tension between them, I think probably my favorite scene might be that first scene where they meet, where he's like, he's had the worst day ever. He looks like garbage, everybody. And then Connor's just rando cop walking by who literally... It's kind of hinted as later on as kind of like his career's been sidelined because of
he's not wanting to play
him not wanting to quote play the game, and that relationship is actually I think among the better things about the movie, even though sometimes the minutia within it is not so great. But again, when it's just De Niro, it's just De Niro, and he's just holding court, and there's no one else to bounce off that, you know.
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem is that. If it would have had his brothers or some other key aspect of his life to play off of, that just frankly would have been a lot more rewarding than just giving him, just like, you know, letting him alone in the pit to do his thing, you know, which he's great in. But I don't know. It just, like you said, there's just this natural distance between those scenes and the other scenes.
Yeah. Costner. We already mentioned as Elliot Ness.
Yeah, you know, I was going to talk about him a little bit with this because I was thinking about Bull Durham from like the transition between Bull Durham to this, where he was becoming a bigger star.
Right, and then he
I think so. Right. Yeah, somewhere in that range. And that's actually subtly became more and more one of my favorite movies of the last so many years that I've seen. I just really love that movie.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the great sports movie stories in terms of just. Situating itself, and what I love about that movie is that he's the quote old man, but he's within the realm of like minor league baseball. So a quote old man is anyone over 30 or on the late 20s, in that world, right? That's quote older, because the Tim Robbins part is the younger guy, and he's very clearly on his way up while Costner's kind of on his way down.
Right.
And I love that relationship, and so. Costner already playing this world-weary, almost cynical character, but then he this transition drops down a bit where he's again the young guy of the bunch. I mean, Andy Garcia is a little younger than him, but in terms of this young moral crusader that, again, as you mentioned earlier, I was thinking about with JFK, kind of continues that. And so weirdly, there's a few of these movies where, again, with like Bull Durham, one of his first really big parts, he plays this wiser than his years baseball player, and then he weirdly de-ages almost to do something like this.
Also, that Elliot Ness, at the time that this movie is set, would have been in his late 20s. So, I mean, he was very young for what he was doing. And so, like I said, I didn't even think about that. It's like a weird de-aging and then it's like he's somewhere in between with the Jim Garrison role. I don't know, like, in a couple years later, but.
And, Kevin Costner's grown on me over the years, as I've seen more of his stuff. I've not even seen Dances with Wolves even still yet. I know that's going to be in the middle of all these movies. But it seemed like there was a time where he was like, and I don't even just mean this purely in the Dances with Wolves sense that it is, but the white savior part, a lot of these went to him in terms of he's Joe Whitebread guy who's going to save the day in a lot of these movies, And JFK's more complicated because you're dealing with all these systems at play and this and I feel
and
like
he doesn't totally save the day at the end of that either.
Don't you feel part of, and obviously we have done a whole podcast on JFK, don't you feel like Jim Garrison in that movie is a weird, and I guess the real Jim Garrison partly represented this, but I mean the Jim Garrison of that movie is a weird, like, alternative version of Kennedy as a man who's against the system, and the system might try to put him down, but he's got a beautiful wife and a beautiful family, and he is the moral crusader of the 60s, and he's taking the torch that Kennedy left. I mean, I feel like it's inherently playing with that tension. And again, this is a younger version of Costner, but I feel like it's also trying to be that. Now, even less so than JFK. And we laughed about it in JFK about, the big moment where his wife and his kids show up and he's in the middle of giving a big monologue
stops.
and he looks and sees them. They are such a non-presence in this movie. I mean, his wife is laughably just like there barely, I mean, like totally utilitarian, nothing burger part. And we've complained about that with various movies over the course of this pod. But definitely with this, I feel like is just such a non-factor.
Is Patricia Clarkson is the wife.
She's a really good actress. She's been in other things. But what in general do you think of Costner in this movie, though?
Well, like I was saying earlier, I mean it's just such a nothing performance ultimately, because it feels like he's just doing the, like I said, the white bread whatever performance, while like all these other bigger, like straight up almost Dick Tracy characters are like doing their thing, and then he's just kind of there, like,
Yeah, and I think sometimes we don't understand. I feel like I've been conscious of this for quite a few years now, but I feel like sometimes we don't understand how hard it is to be the lead of a movie when there's all these more interesting parts that surround the lead. That everyone else has their quirk, like, Sean Connery's the grizzled cop, old cop, Irish cop. Andy Garcia is like the young Italian, which in real life he's Latino, of course. And then you got like Charles Martin Smith, who I just looked, by the way, was director of Air Bud. I was clicking through his Wikipedia page. He's directed some movies.
That.
Yeah, so
that's
random.
Insane.
So much random. But he's like the nerdy accountant. Like, they all have their little thing, and he doesn't. Costner doesn't. He's just Joe Whitebread, like I said. So I think sometimes, like, that, I think we undervalue sometimes what a tough thing that is to be Joe Whitebread in a movie like this.
Yeah.
And again, I think Costner does the best with what he's given, but what he's given is just so nothing. I mean, there's really nothing compelling about this character as it's written on the page. So I think he does well with what he's given, but it's just it's a part you're almost doomed to forget about. He's merely meant to be the lead pointing the gun in the train station. You remember those moments that he's in. You don't really remember any lines of dialogue he gives, other than what's the crap he says to Capone at the end, like never stop fighting, never stop fighting till the fight is done. What?
Or, come on, you dirty son of a bitch.
Yeah.
What? You say that, you talk like that in front of my son? F you and your family. It's like, literally, he's like, so, by the way, his son is like as big as he is.
Yeah,
and
right.
he's like, you talk like that in front of my son is like, what, like he's a 5-year-old? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. All
right.
Yeah, whatever. Sean Connery.
Academy Award
Agent
winner.
James Jim Malone won an Academy Award for this movie. Where do you even begin? I don't know. Just
well,
I mean, it's very much a whole like old man role. He knows what's going on. He's the teacher, the mentor, that whole thing. You know,
we've talked about Connery before. Back when we did Marnie, which I think he's terrific in, and that was in the middle of his initial Bond run. Connery getting older, I think that was another thing too, is that just the taste of the Academy, and we've complained about this plenty of times, that, this actor hasn't won, he's getting older, well, we better reward him while we can, and that's why he wins. And again, this is the type of part that the Academy Awards love, in terms of older icon that we used to love in like a more, quote, legitimate role than what, quote, James Bond would be, even though everybody knows and remembers him from that.
Yeah.
But let's reward him for this. Carry a badge, carry a gun. That's like, oh yeah, nice. High five moment. And yeah, I mean, he's very over the top. And I think this role would not look as bad as if this movie, again, was more tonally regulated for that performance to just make sense. And that's part of the larger problems with the movie, is the tone. And I feel like that's an easy thing to complain about with a lot of movies. But the tone in this movie is so whacked out.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is like the musical cues mixed with the violence on screen totally are, just in opposite directions with each other. It just makes no sense. And so him doing this goofy voice and then committing these awful acts of violence in the name of the law, just to me, just rings very hollow and very
and I mean, his
what?
whole character's motivations are trash too, because you think about it takes Costner's character to be like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, it feels like there's a scene missing somewhere of him really wrestling with these ideas of, I do need to help him out. He kind of does that when he shows up at the station, but it's pretty wordless and kind of just like, all right, well, we're doing it now. And it's like I said, it's all implied, which is funny for a movie that's so obvious the rest of the time.
Right.
But yeah, that's just a whole part of this that really annoys me too, because then it's like, there's the whole scene where they go into the post office and have their first liquor raid, and he's like, we go through this door right now. There's no going back, you understand? Like, that whole thing, and it's acting like it's a big moment. It's like, so you've known about this forever and are just now caring to do anything about it.
Yeah, because
It's
he's
like,
instantly, we laughed about this watching again, it's like, he instantly knew the biggest place to go was the literal post office, where this is all happening behind the scenes. And he, again, that's this big moment. You can feel it's like, if we go through, like you said, if we go through this door, there's no turning back. And they, of course, they bust down the door, and it's got this heroic music that's playing.
And then hey, this is no good, like that guy.
You got a warrant.
And his fingers are like,
yeah,
you can't see it, but
then he gets whacked.
He gets,
batter upped.
Well, he gets hit in the crotch with the shotgun. Sure, here's my warrant.
Yeah.
And then he gets beat over the head with a baseball bat by Al Capone. How all this was that guy's fault, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, we did learn last week with the Geraldo special that he was had an attraction to violence. He got off on it.
Scarface Al, yeah.
Right. But yeah, and I know the whole idea is that, he's working for this corrupt police force and he can't out himself too much, but it's just all very just fraudulent, I think. But anyway, Charles Martin Smith is Oscar Wallace. Not as much to say about him in this. He's a very bookish type. He has the carry badge, carry gun moment. He's the secret genius because he figures out all the stuff they need to do. about he's like not paid taxes and big laugh, and then it's like we realize we can't get him on anything else, so we need to do that, like, you know.
Real quick, I just wanted to backtrack for a second. Yeah. Other nominees for Best Supporting Actor this year that Connery won. Albert Brooks in Broadcast News.
Yeah.
Immediate win. What a rich character.
Yeah.
Like, what a great character.
I don't even know what the rest of those are, and it's an immediate win, so go ahead.
Morgan Freeman in Street Smart. Is that movie that Christopher Reeve was also in? And he's like this pimp.
That's kind of funny,
whatever.
Yeah.
Now, this is another, I think, contender here. Vincent Gardenia in Moonstruck. He's really amazing in that movie.
Yeah, he is.
And then Denzel Washington in Cry Freedom. Particularly Albert Brooks.
That's an immediate win.
Amazing performance.
One of his best performances in a whole. Yeah, that is that movie you're talking about. That's Street Smart. I just laugh when I think about it sometimes. Yeah, but anyway, it's a disaster, that whole choice.
But don't you think that the thing with Charles Martin Smith is that the movie is positioning us to eye roll at him at like wanting to get Capone in this pussified way, like no, it can't be tax evasion. We gotta bust the doors.
We gotta be
down
real G-men.
We gotta. But it's like, well, who cares? This scumbag does not deserve to be on the streets.
I mean, he got enough time for it.
But I feel like the movie's wanting us to roll our eyes at him, even though maybe it's also operating with the irony of, well, that's how he was gotten, and the awareness of the audience of that, too. But
and also, don't it at the end they kind of come up with the whole thing about, all these jurors were bribed, and like all that stuff's surely made up, I would think, like.
That's the thing. So much of this movie's such
right. So it's like
fiction,
they can't even let it go on the basic tax evasion, bookkeeping stuff. It has to be. It's also shown that you have participated in widespread corruption. It's like even Charles Martin Smith's mission has to be soiled by but there's something else too. Right. It's like it's just stupid. But anyway, Andy Garcia is. Agent Giuseppe George Stone Petri, or as he says, Giuseppe Petri, which I've been saying all day to myself.
Don't you love that scene where I actually, one of my other favorite scenes is where they go to meet him at the firing range, and he's like, and he's like, well, why? And he's already
God, don't give me that bull.
and then he calls himself George Stone, which is very clearly his anglicized name, and Connery sees right through it, and he's like, "No,
what's your real name?"
And then and he starts using all these racial and ethnic epithets, basically,
Petri.
about him being Italian.
Yeah, and then he's like, "It's a better race than you stinking Irish."
And all that just endears
he's like, I like him. And it's like
Connery.
What?
Yeah.
Like that literally makes no sense in any movie to me, where it's like, I'm going to bully this guy, and then, I'm going to effing kill you. I love him. Yeah, he's great. It's like, what?
Now, we loosely talked about this era of Andy Garcia back when we did the Godfather Blowout Sale bonus episode, if you remember.
This is also
Godfather
before
3.
Stand and Deliver, one scene.
No, I've not seen that in
one
long
scene, fire sale with... Edward James Olmos, just them two going at it, screaming.
Who's
like,
Andy Garcia in that again?
He's like
somebody works in the schools.
He's literally in one scene, like he's barely even in it, but like
as we were saying earlier, I was looking. He's from Cuban heritage.
Yeah.
I think I saw something that when he was 5 years old, his parents fled. I think it was during the
1988 was Stand and Deliver, so right before this, Yeah, but he's barely in that. If I remember, he's literally in like one scene. Yeah, literally, he's Andy Garcia as Ramirez. Like, But anyway,
what do you think of Garcia in this?
I think he's all right. I mean, it's one of those roles that's very basic. It's weird because it's like he's the young guy, and it's like, well, Kevin Costner's already the young guy. So it's like, but he's fine in it. But like, I feel like there's a lot of scenes he's kind of just like there, or he's not in. Like even that big kind of Canadian border scene, He's like barely in because he gets shot and he's hurt, and that's literally used as a moment where Charles Martin Smith can be like, and and go off or whatever. Yeah. And then like the only real scene he's of consequence is the train station sequence where he's like actually shooting people and doing stuff. Other than that, he's barely in it.
Giuseppe Petri gets his due.
Giuseppe Petri, yeah. But yeah, I mean he's good, but he's not really in a whole lot of it. Billy Drago is Frank Nitti. Literally one of the weirdest performances. Well, first of all, obviously, Frank Nitti was like more of an actual underboss type, not like a straight-up hitman that went out and did stuff. Mm-hmm. And he probably did that at some point, like Al Capone did, I suppose. Yeah. But, like, yeah, that's a totally, not only a historically inaccurate character, just a really annoying and grating like character just in general, and like I said, not at all probably like the real guy.
Yeah, we were talking about when we watched this. He's like made to almost look and feel like a snake, and like just something.
Yeah, he looks like somebody that would have played the Joker or something. Like a very like weird,
We're gonna get into some brief Frank Nitti talk in the next movie too, because he's a recurring character.
Right.
It's weird watching these movies back to back because they loosely one follows the other chronologically, even though tonally and the time periods.
In this movie, it's all different. Like, "Come on, arrest me," like the way he talks, and then in the next movie, it's like, "Wake up" on the phone. So it's all very different. Like he's very weird. Just Billy Drago in general. It's hilarious even saying that name because it makes you think of Ivan Drago.
Yeah, that's
like,
what I was thinking.
Whenever the Wi-Fi works, we'll look at him. But I mean, like he's just he's basically. He's a De Palma character, if you know what I mean. He's a guy who stalks people. He wears gloves. He's very giallo, like,
To that point, it almost wouldn't it have been a more interesting movie that he could have made of, like, a gangland serial killer, of, like, a guy who is involved in this life and, like, also goes around and kills people in this world. And he's trying not to get caught, but also do his job, work as a mobster. Right. Like, that almost seems like the De Palma movie, gangster movie that nobody would have expected him to make.
Right. And I mean, like I say, and I'll talk more about that later, about I think of this as a kind of giallo gangster movie in certain ways. But
probably why it's so beloved, actually, I'm thinking about
it. Billy Drago was in Pale Rider, Cutter's Way, Windwalker, this movie, obviously. Yeah. He was in that movie Vamp with, I think that's that movie with Grace Jones as a vampire, maybe.
Yeah.
China White, Friday 13th, the series. But yeah, there's just a lot of random stuff he's been in, but overall, this is like by far the biggest thing. He was on the X-Files, of course he was.
And one that you want to see him killed in this awful, brutal way.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, in the logic of this movie, you get to see that happen. When in reality, I think he took his own life, death by his own hand, for real.
Yeah. The Hills Have Eyes remake, he was in as Papa Jupiter. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course. But yeah, he's just a really weird guy. He died back a couple years ago, 2019. But yeah, his whole character is so strange, and we'll get back to the giallo part of that later. But yeah, he's very like he reminds me a lot also, and of this also another character like that of John Lithgow in Blowout, like very much like that kind of role, whatever. The other ones, there's not as much to say about. Of course, there's Patricia Clarkson. We mentioned literally a nothing, role. Richard Bradford is Police Chief Mike Dorset. He's the like take a day off, like and
he's kind of an old or ex-friend, I should say, of Connery's, who clearly is on the take and clearly is corrupt, and so there's this tension between them.
Yeah, and there's
throughout
that scene. One of my other favorite scenes is them, the old men fighting scene in the rain.
And I know we mentioned it last episode, but episode 90. When I recently have They Live again on my mind, I was actually thinking about that fight scene in that. With
this is way shorter, obviously, but like that, he's like telling him, "You're gonna tell me where the bookkeeper is," or whatever. He's like, "You're out of your effing mind," like, just like, that whole performance is just hilarious. And then Jack Kehoe is Walter Payne, who's the bookkeeper. By the way, it should be noted, he's called the bookkeeper.
He has no first or last name.
Well, he is Walter Payne. They mention that like in the trial
Okay.
Literally, when it's like, you know what really would have been great is if they didn't do it then. They called him by the bookkeeper. They didn't call him by his legal name.
The
right.
Yeah, please approach the stand.
Like, but I mean, yeah, he's barely in it.
He's the MacGuffin of the movie.
Yeah,
and we don't even. I mean, there's no personality given whatsoever. He's just bookkeeper who's got the books. Like,
yeah. I want to mention some other things he's in. He's in Serpico, supposedly. I've never seen that, believe it or not. Pope of Greenwich Village, Car Wash. Oh, he was in Midnight Run. I kind of remember him in that a little bit. Young Guns 2.
Oh, good for him.
He was in The Sting. I don't remember that. Melvin and Howard. I've always wanted to see that. He was on some TV. But anyway, yeah, he's so over the top performance. Like, it's almost like in the train station sequence, which we're going to talk about probably more in depth later. It's like, who can act more, his captor or him? Yeah. You know, it's like, who can be more over the top? And it's like, let's see, you know, because I've got the bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper and me are driving away. You know, that guy, he kind of wins the movie in a lot of ways. But anyway, and that's pretty much it as far as characters. There's that guy George. I don't remember who he is in the movie. Brad Sullivan. He was also in The Sting and the gruff Henry Wingo in The Prince of Tides. Henry Wingo. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Slapshot. But yeah, I mean, that's the acting there. Do you want to talk first about David Mamet before we get to Brian De Palma?
So you know, David Mamet, I think most people know him as a playwright who, you know, he wrote a lot of big plays throughout the 80s.
Because I know him as a useless a-hole, but go on.
And he started making some movies in Hollywood, and I think this probably propelled him to greater success. And he's most known for his dialogue. I mean, it's kind of pre-Tarantino in terms of people talking about how in your face and memorable the dialogue of his movies are, or his plays / movies are. And then, you know, he wrote the play version of Glengarry Glen Ross, which was then made into the movie in the early 90s, which we both like that movie.
Yeah, that is good.
And I do
some other plays he wrote, by the way. He wrote that, Speed the Plow, and then also The Duck Variation, Sexual Perversity in Chicago, and American Buffalo.
I love The Duck Variation.
Yeah, Race and The Penitent are also other ones. Yeah, and then he would go on, say, make movies in Hollywood. Postman Always Rings Twice remake he wrote. The Verdict. That's probably overall the best thing he's ever had anything to do with, I think. Pretty definitively is The Verdict. Hoffa. Wag the Dog. Let's see. There's a couple others here. What was it? Oh, well, House of Games we've talked about. He also directed that. That movie's terrible.
Yeah.
Homicide. He directed. Joe Matanga was also in that.
Yeah.
The Spanish Prisoner.
Okay.
Anyway. But yeah, Mamet is known for being a screenwriter, obviously.
Yeah.
I said known for, like I said, the dialogue. That's really the big thing with this movie too. I think is especially though with Glengarry Glen Ross. That's just such a big part of that, and how vulgar it is, and all those things. He described himself as a red diaper baby, and I know he's Jewish. Which is funny considering some of his more modern political views.
They're much more conservative.
And not really like that at all. Yeah, because he said there was that essay, Why I'm No Longer a Brain Dead Liberal. So he's more of a conservative.
Why I'm now a brain dead conservative,
right.
I guess.
Argued against gun control. Described the NFL anthem protest as, quote, absolutely effing despicable, unquote. Described Trump as a great president. He endorsed the basically rigged election stuff. Yeah.
He said stuff also what really rankered me with regards to teachers and education, that like modern education is like propaganda and or grooming children.
Yeah, it says Mamet claimed that the law was necessary because teachers are abusing children mentally and using sex to do so, further alleging that teachers are inclined, particularly men, because men are predators to pedophilia.
Yeah, screw him and screw, any influence he has since had, because I often think of him in the same league as another playwright turned screenwriter, Aaron Sorkin.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Aaron Sorkin not only has delivered more consistent, bankable, filmed either movies or television shows, but he has a formal inventiveness that is not there with what I've seen from Mamet so far. Now, if I go back and read some of the plays, maybe some of that has a formal inventiveness to it. But it seems like he was really, of his era, taking advantage of, it's going to be cool and vogue for a character to talk like this, and so I'm going to write obscene dialogue.
Like Elmore Leonard hadn't already been doing that in novels.
And I guess that was a theatrical version of that had already been around in that crime fiction, vogue. But again, I think about, most especially with Aaron Sorkin, The Social Network, like the structure of that movie and how it's oriented, or the high ideals meets the grim realities of politics with The West Wing, which I think is sometimes, because people have this idea that The West Wing is like this totally celebratory view of politics, and there are a lot of things about it that is a more glass half full version. But there's a lot of compromises in that show too, and if people who have maybe forgot that show, is so much of the Toby Ziegler character is berating the president. People are like, we said we were going to do this, why aren't we doing it? And the tension in that, especially as the show went on, to the extent sometimes it was in seasons that Sorkin was not even involved in anymore. But nonetheless, I think that show's actually a lot better and a lot more complicated than people remember it, especially someone who recently saw the whole thing last year and this year. But anyways, and then you think of like A Few Good Men. I mean, that movie has dynamic, crazy, great dialogue, but also it's directed at the highest level by Rob Reiner, and of course with Nicholson and Tom Cruise. I mean, a lot going for it. But anyways, I think Sorkin is the gold standard in the modern era in terms of somebody who comes from the world of theater and goes into film and television and does really great work that stands out. Even his Steve Jobs movie,
I thought that was good. I know a lot of people have forgotten
Danny
about
Boyle
it.
Directed.
I gave that movie 5 stars at the time, and I don't think that's that insane. I wouldn't give it that now, probably, but in memory.
Well, I remember when it first came out, and I did quite like it. It was in the shadow of The Social Network, which was, many people would argue, and I would agree, that is one of the best modern movies of the last 20 years.
Yeah, I was thinking about that movie the other day because the trailer was circulating on Twitter again, and I was just sitting there watching, and I was like, dang, this movie is so... Because I had liked it the first time I had seen it years ago, and then it was a couple years ago I saw it again, and it was just like from the very beginning, it was immediately like, this is one of the best movies ever. I mean, frankly, is really great. This is going to
offend Zodiac people, but I think Fincher's finest movie.
Oh yeah,
because of the writing too, and that's a perfect example of the directing prowess and the writing and the performances just all being at the right place at the right time for a movie like that. But,
no, that movie is masterful.
Anyway, so I hold Sorkin in high regard. And again, I've been wanting to rewatch not Steve Jobs. Jobs was that one, right?
No, it was Steve Jobs was this one that we're talking about. Jobs was the one with Ashton Kutcher in it.
Okay, so
the guy who doesn't bathe.
Also, protect him, and apparently Mila Kunis are protecting Danny Masterson or whatever in the midst of all his rape charges.
Anyway, what do you think about David Mamet's work on this movie?
Well, so this is this whole movie feels like a Wheel of Fortune of just a bunch of dumb things going on all at once anyways. And so it's like, give me a vowel. Like, again, this is what the point I was trying to build to is like, formally, basic, bare bones, nothing inventive about the style, the tone, the sense of atmosphere. I hear all this talk about the Chicago way and Chicago this and Chicago that. I think also I think Mamet might be from Chicago, or he did some theater in Chicago. I can't remember. So maybe he
Yeah, he's from Chicago.
Yeah, so I'm sure he took so much pride in that aspect. But I just don't feel a real sense of time and place with this movie. I mean, I think when you're doing like a gangster movie, that's what you really want, and you want to feel. And because you think of a classic gangster movie like, say, Goodfellas, right?
Yeah.
One of the many great things about Goodfellas is it's a rock and roll gangster movie.
Yeah.
It's the classic rise and fall story, but on cocaine, literally and figuratively. It's got that rock and roll soundtrack. And that, again, I think now that's seen as, quote, classic. That it was not classic in 1990. That was Scorsese's, like, thinking about, who would this generation of guys who are in this time and place, what would be their gangster movie? And again, I think that's now something like Goodfellas has been so
70s,
canonized, it's seen as this classic thing. But that was not classic in 1990.
70s and 80s gangsterism has been covered a lot more, even with The Sopranos. Also, after that, of coming into the idea of, okay, these people in the 2000s, their father or their progenitors
of Newark was, of course,
being that era
prequel,
of gangster, and like that making sense to those people. Yeah, but at the time, like I said, that was inventive.
Like something like Goodfellas was, and
even as a screenplay, like you said, was
Nicholas Pileggi wrote
very and something that doesn't seem so, like you said, classical and like this monument and granite that everyone chips away at now, but was so big at the time. Yeah, this is basically nothing. Even his dialogue, it's pretty unremarkable.
I mean, it's got some moments where it's trying to be snappy and it's trying to be memorable, but I mean, it all mostly falls flat. A lot of it due to this tonal disaster that De Palma is insistent on making sure happens,
along with Ennio Morricone. So, do you want to talk about Morricone first, or you want to talk about De Palma
first? What do you take from Mamet's script here? I mean,
nothing.
And vision of
no. I mean, it's like I said, it's very basic. It feels like
I don't know the whole background of this. Did this start off as a script he was making, or was he hired?
I think it was that someone. I think it was Ned Tannen, the producer, was trying to make this into a movie like forever, because they wanted to make the book. And there's a more serious, authentic depiction of Ness's career in Chicago.
You miss Levi's eye roll.
Linson hired playwright David Mamet to compose an original script for the film. Most of Mamet's screenplay was used, but director Brian De Palma slightly rewrote some scenes during production in order to incorporate new locations. For instance, the scene paying homage to the Potemkin stairs from Battleship Potemkin was moved from a hospital to Chicago Union Station. Why would that have ever been in a hospital? I don't understand that. Maybe that was a whole thing of maybe they took him to the hospital or something.
It's all assuredly a made-up crap anyway, so it don't even matter where it takes place. Like, it could be in a hospital, it could be in the effing morgue, it can be in a movie theater, it could be in a train, wherever. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter.
Right, but so they wanted to make this for a while, and so De Palma was kind of brought on to write it.
So everybody was kind of, and this is how most movies operate, by the way, but I guess everybody was kind of brought on piecemeal, like in various contexts. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There were probably multiple treatments before this that Ned Tannen had other screenwriters write as a basis of the book.
I think it's too that something we should mention is that this was we've talked about the 90s boom of TV adaptations.
Yeah.
I guess this was right around before that.
It's weird because I always assumed that, but it seems to me like it is more of like we're adapting the book, but also it was well known that this was a TV show, so it's kind of both.
Which I feel like for our generations is lost to time a little bit. I mean, we can go back and watch it, but most people don't really even remember that. Obviously, of younger generation, that this was a TV show. I mean,
because
older audiences would have.
Because literally until we watched the last week, the special on the Al Capone's vaults, I didn't even know Robert Stack was in that. I just knew who Robert Stack was.
Right.
So that was another thing that was kind of weird. It was like, I didn't even really know that. But
let's talk about Morricone next, because before we'll leave De Palma for last.
Well, and I've always been. Can I take the lead on this? Because I feel like I say this all the time, but Ennio Morricone is literally the most overrated artist in film, in motion picture history, who also just so happened, I think, to score the greatest film score of all time in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
Both of those things can be true at the same time. I think that his work with Morricone with Leone overall has been good.
Yeah. Some of the stuff in Once Upon a Time in the West, which is a movie we don't love.
Well,
as
that's a
much
half
as
and
we used
half.
to. I think there's some good music in that.
There's some good stuff and there's some pretty bad stuff. I think the harmonica stuff is bad, which is in this movie a lot.
Bob Dylan's playing harmonica,
right? Which is in this movie a lot too. But yeah, basically the Dollars movies and parts of that are good. Everything else I've ever heard, well, and The Thing is a little bit different for him.
Didn't he do some original music for The Hateful Eight?
Yeah,
and
now
then it also
that,
had some older
that
stuff
is
too.
pretty good, I'll say. But everything else from him, I think, I know we're saying a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, but he's done a lot of stuff. So
he had a huge career.
Yeah. This is by far, if you had to ask me.
I mean, I remember it.
Yeah.
So
but
memorable.
I think this actually might literally be the single worst film score I've ever heard. I'm not even saying that just to say it. Like, think about there's that. Then there's like the more.
Which opens the movie.
There's the more like romantic scores. Then there's the big fanfare. You know, and then there's like I said, the Al Capone, swanky, gaudy ass stuff. Mm-hmm. Then there's some kind of horror stuff in there. It's literally, it all feels disjointed. None of it feels like it's part of the same score to me.
Well, wouldn't you agree that, because the score is dependent on if it's good, I mean, people talk about scores all the time.
Yeah.
Like, some of the best ones are ones you don't even really notice or pay attention to. Like, I mean, how we've talked about it a lot. Like, No Country for Old Men actually does have score.
Yeah.
But it's used in very sparing moments and aspects.
Right.
There Will Be Blood, one of the greatest modern film scores from any era, of course. That is that heightens the tone. I mean, you think of like the explosion of the oil well scene in that, and that whole, I mean, how music is just like, I mean, the visuals are there, the acting's there, it's all there, but the music takes it to this operatic, biblical level, right?
And you know what's funny also about that is that also that piece of music is why that movie was unable to be nominated for an Academy Award, because it was technically not original for that movie. He had made that for Johnny Greenwood had made that for something else, I think, before that or whatever.
And then Nita Rota, his Godfather score, I think, had a similar thing, and that obviously elevates that movie. And so I think honestly one of the, I mean, I do think that the Morricone score is one of the big sins of this movie, because it goes back to that tone issue we talked about, and that if the score would have been frankly better, and I don't know how, I feel like somebody's sitting out there listening right now like, who the hell are you to say any Morricone? It's like, what are you doing with film or whatever? You're a teacher, you don't know, blah blah. But like, I know what I feel. Okay, I know what I feel, and when I watch this movie, the score and its imprecision is part of why this movie's a tonal mess, and it fuels these other problems. I honestly think if you gave this movie a half-decent score, it has the potential to maybe be a 3-star movie.
It could be.
I mean, I think that alone is actually something that
and
holds
I think
it back.
it's a 1.5-star movie.
I would give it a very low 2 myself.
And it could easily get to average or kind of good. No, that is the biggest problem with the movie more than anything else, is that, because but De Palma encourages that too.
Oh well, absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
And he has his own problems with the direction of that too, the goofiness of the characters at a point. But no, that is the problem, because, like I said, what film scores should do is either be invisible or to heighten whatever it is that's going on. And the score of this movie is always the center stage of whatever's happening. It's so loud and bombastic that it. And like I said, it not being in concert with it, like, I think in particular of the scene, the Canada scene, and that's the more like the fanfare kind of music, and there's people just getting blasted, just awful death. And it's like, what? And you know, the best version of that is the train station sequence. That feels more in concert with the action, finally, a little bit. But no, literally everything else, it's like, no.
I mean, and again, that kind of thing works for like and and I don't even mean this in a dismissive way, but like it's just another thing, like an Italian genre movie.
Yeah.
Like this kind of thing flies and is fine and can be good.
Yeah.
But it just does not work.
Yeah, like if it's
this
Danger
is.
Diabolique, which I've seen, he did the score for. Yeah, that totally works, and that it's a stupid, goofy score, but that movie's a comic book movie. I mean, whatever.
Or like you think of Ecstasy of Gold at the end of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. I mean, that heightens the visuals that Leone's working with in that, and again, I don't think, you know, because I feel like when we see that scene, we think a lot about the music and we think about Leone's cutting. I mean, the actors in that too are in perfect concert with all of that going on and understand the moment and everything.
Right.
So,
no, but
that's like I mean, that's one of the greatest scenes in the history of movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think he should deserve credit where credit's due.
Oh no, that's what I'm
saying.
Is like,
you know,
I don't know, because like I said, Ennio Morricone is one of the most confusing forces in modern cinema to me, because
he passed away a few years ago. Right?
Yeah, he could when he was on, those few times he was on, it was like nothing else ever made. Yeah. But then there's stuff like this, which is a 101 into how to not make a film score.
Yeah,
it's baffling. Yeah, it really. I mean, because like I said, and then we'll get to De Palma in just a second, but because he's encouraging all this too by what he's doing. But that's the thing. It's like if you made this movie in the 70s as like, and you'd have to change the score even then, as like the Hot Rock, for example.
Yeah.
The Peter Yates film.
Yeah.
Like, if you even made it like that, you could at least go, okay, like, sure, this is a little more of a comedy, it's not as violent, it's more like, oh, look at the crazy, you know, stuff that happens. This, though, what is that? Life is Tough, Providence?
It's a movie he did the score for. I was just look at all these movies.
Oh yeah,
I mean this is like 73 by this point.
Well, and that's something that we've talked about before, and everybody knows is that he was so lazy he would reuse scores and stuff.
Yeah.
And partly that was because he made so many. He was like, okay, well, I'll just do whatever. He did Days of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
It says composed with Leo Kottke.
Oh, so that's why it wasn't real bad. Okay. Y'all are probably thinking I am being a little hyperbolic, but there is a very big drop from like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and the other Dollars movies to like then down to stuff like this. It's like I said, there's something like The Thing is so different.
Well,
and
don't you
part of
agree
that is too because John Carpenter is himself a musician. There had to have been some sort of back and forth on that made that what it was.
Yeah, I mean Carpenter himself is capable of making his own great scores. I mean,
So anyway, that's all just to say that it is a blatant stain on this movie that cannot be erased. And like I said, it's not the only problem, but it's like 60% of the problem. Honestly,
like I said, if you take the exact same movie and swapped out a different score, I think depending on what the score was, it could be again, I think it could be a whole star better of a movie. I think.
And like I said, it's fine for a score to be conspicuous. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it's, first of all, just doesn't sound good as music, that's a problem. But especially when you add that to the fact it's not in concert, literally, with the acts being portrayed in the movie. And I know we were talking about, and we've talked about violence in De Palma movies here and there.
So much.
Some of this stuff is some of the most violent stuff I've ever seen in a movie. Like
a scene that I think a lot about, and this can transit. What'd you say? A blatant stain, or that could be that could be the working title for a Brian De Palma memoir, or blatant stain. But the scene I think a lot about is when Charles Martin Smith is murdered in the elevator, and there's the blood on the.
Specifically, the guy got shot in the forehead. That other guy,
and like when they come in and the music's playing during that,
it
makes me about want to laugh. It's like it's just like it's so not what should be.
And that's
in that
the
moment.
Tragic score. It feels like Twin Peaks, which I love. But you know how Badalamenti basically scored 5 pieces of music, or more or less a handful, and then literally there were times in that show when it was like we're using the Laura theme.
Yeah.
Now we're using the Roadhouse theme. Now we're using the Double R theme or this and like that worked because that show was already a soap opera in disguise.
I was getting to say, I think that
Um,
whole show operates on this level
yeah.
of melodrama that I don't know if this thinks it's wanting to do or maybe be, or I just doesn't know what it is.
Right.
I mean,
but this movie, literally, you can do that though in a TV show where it's like every week there's different stuff going on. Here, it's like it's a one-shot movie, and you've got like 4 different pieces of music you use consistently, and that just is automatic. Because like you think about, for example, I know we're talking a lot about music here, but you think about any John Williams score. Just take Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, for example, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, first one. I don't know why I said that. You take Raiders of the Lost Ark, for example. Any John Williams score, but you hear his hooks.
Yeah.
But it's different pieces of music.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think about some of the stuff, the truck chase towards the end of the movie, where he's riding on the horse and then he's getting in the truck to try to get him, stop him from stealing the Ark. And like, there's big parts of the na 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 in there, but then there's everything else. It's like other scores and other pieces of music put together. It's like that's how you score a movie.
Yeah.
It's very basic. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
It actually is complicated, but when you see great people do it, that's where it works. Now, it seems like, though, Morricone wasn't the type of person who would do that. He liked to have different pieces of music for different scenes, because, like, you think about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I mean, the theme from that movie plays throughout, but then you have the Ecstasy of Gold, you have the final showdown piece of music, you have the Tuco getting beat up. Like, there's all these different pieces throughout that are explicitly different from the other. But here, it's too repetitive. Like, I would accept it if there was one Untouchables theme that played multiple times, and then you had a couple other ones. But this, it's like 4 or 5 times for each piece of music.
Yeah.
And that just is another problem. It feels very uninspired.
Yeah.
But, anyway.
So, I think the last big thing to talk about this movie is De Palma. I think if you're like me, excuse me, when you first think of Brian De Palma, you think of his thrillers, you think of his horror movies. I mean, that's what
Scarface, Carrie,
that, and mixed with like the Hitchcock allegations that he's faced over the years of his movies, or such,
Body Double,
rip-offs of Alfred
Sisters.
Hitchcock. I feel like that's less obvious with this one, mostly because the subject matter is not exactly Hitchcockian, in that way. But one of the, and I've grown on De Palma a little bit over the years. I still think he's overall probably overrated, but there are movies of his I more and more like, and particularly the crime movies. I mean, Carlito's Way is a movie that I quite like.
Yeah.
It's another thing, but Blowout's his best movie. That's not
that is really great.
Movie, but I think that's his best movie.
Phantom of the Paradise is really good. I think that's his most different movie, and is really inspired, especially in an era where you're getting a lot of these glam rock movies.
Yeah,
that's by far the best, I think.
But and then also, obviously, Scarface, which was a few years before this. I mean, that's one of the defining movies of the '80s.
And then also being an Oliver Stone product is part of that too. Yeah.
And then later on with Carlito's Way, and then Snake Eyes, which is a movie I have a lot of
Snake Eyes is just
for.
fun. It's not that great, but it's a fun movie. Yeah.
So De Palma, again, this isn't his quote his most Hitchcockian movie in the way that a lot of his other ones are, but he's definitely operating in his mode, and there are moments of the voyeur, of like those first person shots and first person angles are here and there throughout the movie.
Because there's the sequence with that guy, the bookkeeper and me are driving away. Like, almost impossibly walking down beside the windows of Connery's house, or his apartment. By the way, how does he have an apartment that big? That's like insane.
Mm-hmm.
I guess literally only in Chicago in the 20s, I guess. But he's literally walking on the trash cans, I guess, and that is literally like in Blowout, the like movie within the movie. In that, it reminds me of parts of Dress to Kill, obviously, which is a terrible movie. Hate that, but
best of luck to you.
Yeah, but that movie is bad. Am I wrong? I mean, not good. No,
don't you feel like, though, one of the biggest modes De Palma uses, and I would say, we can talk about this with Public Enemies, actually, too, because I think has a similarity as that of the Western, actually. It's this, like, the white hat versus black hat, showdown, me and you in the middle of nowhere with guns, like, that, like, Western...
Walter Hill,
again, it's all it's all
too.
set in like a urban environment, but it very much has the feel of a Western. Again, we'll talk about that with Public Enemies later because I think it also does the same thing. But it seems like, again, that's him operating in a little bit more of this black hat, white hat Western mode, which, again, he usually likes making movies and narratives about where you're not really sure, quote, who you're rooting for or who the, quote, good or bad guy is, because it's
Scarface is a good version.
Thematically, it's just more messy because it's just like, I mean, especially with his horror thrillers, it's just like, you know, who am I rooting for here? This all feels perverse.
Blowout is a good version of that too, because it's like, what I like about that character of Travolta, though, he's pretty innocent overall, because he's literally just like, I literally was just recording stuff and this happened. I guess Nancy Allen in that is a little more of the like, what exactly is your deal, and like, but also what is great about the ending of that movie too is using her scream, which he recorded in a movie, and nobody knowing that but him, is one of the most, I think, genuinely great, but also shockingly perverse endings to anything I've ever seen.
He had to love that, and made people wonder, how many real murders have ended up in movies, and that's part of his whole vibe. But again, I'm not trying to make this all political about the 80s, but this seems like De Palma's interpretation of this 80s good guys versus bad guys, Reagan-era mentality, yet another reheated redux of a 50s, 60s era world.
Yeah, it's like,
you know what I mean? In terms of when that show was made.
It's like the way Superman is depicted in Batman, the Dark Knight Returns is similar, being like a Reagan era figure, Superman.
But don't you find that with De Palma's direction in this movie, it's like it's a lot more traditional in some ways than his other movies are, and part of that's just by nature of the story itself. It's more like good versus evil.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even say it's like Blue Velvet in the sense of like American Beauty, of that like what lies beneath. It's not exactly that.
No, it's a very simplistic idea. These people are bad. They need to be. And I'm not even saying that's wrong, because I don't think there's a lot of ambiguity to be had with these monstrous criminals. I mean, need to be put behind bars or killed. Frankly,
but no, you're right. I think it's this weird good versus evil thing that's very strange, because normally, I said, he doesn't exactly do that usually. But I think Phantom of the Paradise is another good version of that, which that is so gonzo, crazy, weird, and surreal. But as far as the main character in that being overall a pretty good guy, just wants to make music, and then is basically killed more or less, but then taking revenge, and then the question becomes, well, why is he good to do that, or what's his, and that's the Phantom of the Opera anyway, is a whole story. But like he's done that, I said, throughout his career. Carlito's Way is a version of that too. But it's like, are we pulling for him?
Again, Sean Penn, the thematics of it are far more messy and interesting. This, like I said, is just like we're just all going in a straight line.
Or even the Black Dahlia being a version of that, I assume, based on what I remember of that book, is like the perversity of police work in these like sex crimes and serial killer cases. But this is just very much not that at all. And Dress to Kill was another version of that too. So we'll just quit naming his movies and just continue. But this it's very simplistic and not in a good way though. Like I would be all right with that if it were. And I'm not even saying Kevin Costner has to be a womanizer and a racist or something. It doesn't have to be that that complicated. But it's just it's very white bread, nothing kind of. And maybe that's because of Mamet too. I don't know. I don't know where that comes in as far as what they wanted out of that. But I feel like it is his version of saying, okay, I'm going to do this Untouchables TV show adaptation like that was.
Yeah.
Which is so strange and foreign considering he's somebody that thrived in that Hitchcock milieu of what are we pulling for, who are we rooting for, like who's good, who's bad.
Those
right.
I mean, it's more morally ambiguous to be in that mode than what he's doing.
Noir or giallo tradition of that.
Yeah.
But then he makes the movie like it's one of those movies, though.
That's where the tonal disconnect is, because he's making a story that's very conventional, but trying to have moments where it's done in what's trying to be a shocking, violent, but celebratory way, and it's just like what? It really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Like that scene after the whole Canada thing, and they're trying to get that guy to tell him where the bookkeeper is. And he literally picks that one guy up off the ground. He's already dead, and points the gun in his mouth. What's the matter? Can't talk with a gun in your mouth? And literally blows his head off through the window.
The guy's already dead, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's like...
So somebody else is seeing that thing, and he's still alive to show him, oh, look how tough we're going to be to get him to admit.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, okay, I'll say whatever.
Yeah.
And then, I do not agree with your methods. Like, what kind of Canadian accent is that, by the way?
Yeah.
And... well, you're not from Chicago. It's like, so what? We're totally insane in Chicago. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I say it's just it's a cartoon. I mean, like, but it's not even Fritz the Cat adult cartoon. It's just like, I don't even, because like I said, it's and it's interesting because stylistically it does look a lot like a De Palma movie. It's very like relatively realistic Chicago. I don't feel like it's overdoing it, but it doesn't feel like big Chicago either. It doesn't have enough exteriors, I think, to make it really feel like that's where it is. It's kind of like, this is just Chicago, and things happen here. Like, there's not shots of meat packing plants and slaughterhouses and train yards, and like, it doesn't overdo it like it honestly should.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it's
and definitely
just a
movie
like,
of this side had the means to do.
Right.
I mean, it's a big Paramount production. I mean.
And this movie was only made for about $25 million and made like $103 million, so it was a big hit. But yeah, that's kind of what we're saying, I guess, ultimately, is there's a lot of these elements here that just aren't coming together, kind of like what we said with American Beauty, where it's just a lot of different things happening and none of them really meeting up.
Which is, why most movies are bad or failures is basically because of that reason.
Right.
It's just the calculus is wrong.
Because
basically.
even looking at this from De Palma's perspective, even with De Palma's problems of being a Hitchcock clone or just ripping or giallo movies or whatever, it was his own interpretation of that always.
Yeah.
He had a style that was definitive. Like when I think of De Palma, I think of camera movements. I think certain camera movements, certain voyeur techniques, certain
split diopter
shots. I think, and there's like one or two of those in this movie. I think of that stuff. I think that is De Palma. That is a signature style that he has made for himself, even despite stealing that or compiling it from other sources. That is him.
I do think there are some moments of visual genius displayed in this movie. I think what shot I think about a lot, and it's in a very obviously written scene, but the scene where they're in the church and the way that it's a low camera angle of them sitting in the pews, and then you see like the church glass behind them.
Yeah,
that is like a really well framed shot, and that dialogue they're having is one of seeming moral complexity. But again, if you read the script as written, it's like not really morally complex. Right. It's just giving us the feeling that it is. What do you think of the train station scene, though?
Yeah,
that's the one that everybody
where
brings
we
up.
can kind of end. I mean, I love it. I watch it by itself every so often. I think if you want to find, like, for him, I think that actually that is his Hitchcock clone at his best. Because I've never seen anybody do suspense like that since Hitchcock. I mean, it was on another level. And even the music is mostly there with it.
Yeah.
It's almost like he forced everything back on the road for that one scene and was like, we got to get this done and we got to get this right. And that's ultimately because De Palma is a sequence filmmaker. He loves making sequences and doing that, like, because
that's how it all fits together.
And because I think about the museum sequence in Dressed to Kill. That's one of the first things I think of with that movie. I think about that scene, kind of toward the climactic scene in Carlito's Way in the train station. In that is similar. So there's a lot of.
He loves taking these places and using them as like a big canvas.
And Blowout had a train station scene too, with in the bathroom, all that stuff with John Lithgow. So he's really good at that. Yeah. But then there's everything else surrounding the movie, and so that's where most of his movies fall apart, let's say. But yeah, with this, I think it really is him. I think it's literally the highest pedigree he's gotten as a filmmaker in a single scene. He's made movies far better.
Yeah.
But is really great, I think, and something that I do hold in high regard. But that never saves the movie for me. Yeah. And even within the scene itself, there's so much stupidity going on of like, the bookkeeper's right there, and like, oh, but you're having to help this woman get the baby up, and that will. But what I like about that too is like the baby crying is like annoying in a way of adding to the suspense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh my God, please shut that baby up. But at the same time, it's like adding to, we have to deal with this problem, but now the other problem is here, and we have to do these two things at once. Really is like far more complex than the themes of the movie.
Yeah.
And so that all works to me. But what do you think about it?
Well, I like it, but I frankly, and I'm not trying to be contrarian about this, I just don't see what as much of the magic is about. I mean, it's got all these comparisons to Battleship Potemkin and the stair sequence in that. And again, I think this scene is good, but I think a lot of my problem with it is I don't feel emotionally invested or connected to the characters in this scene at all. I mean, there's the baby aspect of it, and it's like, oh, well, you want the baby to be safe and not be hurt, but like that almost seems like
that's a cheap way to do that.
A cheap way, again, for him to elicit interest or compassion in this scene. There's also just, and again, I know it's trying to play towards this dramatic tension, but there's also even just the logic of, well, they could easily just shut down all the trains where the trains are going to leave, and they have the authority to do that, but I don't know. And again, I think it's well done. I'm not going to say it's not, but I just don't feel the attachment to it that a lot of other people do. I don't know. It's good, but like, when I think about the one in Carlito's Way especially, I think of how desperate Pacino looks and acts throughout that whole sequence. I mean, and then there's all these near misses, and he's like crawling on his hands and knees at various points, and just the desperation that
because I remember a specific shot in that where like he's like behind a pillar and kind of standing there, and people are running by. No, because that's more of a chase sequence. This isn't exactly that. It's
So I'm not trying not trying to be cynical about it. It's just I'm not emotionally. I don't care. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, because even Scarface, the ending of that works in a way where it's like you've hated this character the whole movie, and it's like And by the way, I always use De Palma as an example randomly when I'm talking about an argumentative paragraph. I'm like, my example is always Brian De Palma is not a great filmmaker because he relies too often on other filmmakers' work to bolster his own or something like that. And I say, this is an opinion.
Yeah.
I say, this is an argument I'm making, and then I can go down evidence and I can use specific movies to say this.
Yeah.
And I always say, and I tell the kids, I'm like, Scarface, Say Hello to My Little Friend. They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, he made that. And I'm like, the only great thing about that movie really is the ending, but you have to watch the whole movie to get there. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can't just, you can watch that by itself.
Yeah.
But, like, no, you got to have that. That's what the release and the catharsis of that scene, the ending of that movie is wow, we finally got here, and he's finally going to get his, and it's so big and maximal, but it's worked up to that point of actually, as much as I'm kind of in the middle on that movie, because I kind of like it, kind of don't, I'm more half and half on that movie is like, man, I really feel a way about this character. It doesn't even have to be a positive feeling, but I feel something towards this to the point where, yes, I can feel that.
And it's just totally consistent.
Right.
Whether you like it or not, it definitely establishes and maintains the tone the whole way through.
And then this, it's like, I don't really care about the heroes, in quotes, of this. Like, we want to mention about the Connery death scene before we move on, at least.
Yeah, so years ago when we were watching this movie with our grandmother.
We mentioned this last week.
The grandmommy, as we always called her, grandmommy, Sandra Bowman, who, go back to our Snow Day episode, and I read my experience getting kicked out of that movie with her.
Snow Day? Yeah, right.
So we were watching, I think, at our
Sarah
and Arnold's house, our great aunt and uncle's house, and that scene was on TV. Was it on TV, or were we watching the DVD?
No, I think it was it was the VHS that we had.
Okay, the
taped.
VHS.
Yeah.
And anyway,
back when it was Mob Week.
Yeah, and so she was raised on that Untouchables show, and that instantly made me understand that her reaction was probably
the way
based
it was
off of
intended.
how it was watched as a show
Yeah.
back in the day. There was probably always a moment in every episode where a version of this happened, where Sean Connery's gunned down by Frank Nitti, and she all of a sudden screams and yells, "Capone got him!" And just and you immediately looked at each other.
What was funny though is that we said that's not Capone. She said, "Oh, okay." So she actually thought it physically was Capone, even though we had already seen and had been established through the Kuleshov effect that he was in another place.
Yeah.
But
I mean, deep down, she was right all along.
She was right.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's just so funny. Yeah. I mean, like, but also we talked about it where Connery's like, "Ooh, like that," and it's
really
like
going for it.
So over the top, and then
so much
all of the blood everywhere. I mean, it's just, and there's no way he would have lived that long.
Yeah.
No way at all.
For Costner to get there and say the last words with him,
and he's like tells him where he's gonna be and what are you prepared to do? Like, you know, just. But as you keep saying, just so much violence, like, you know. I mean,
that's a line we quote a lot.
Yeah, it's at the end of the movie where he looks
that's one
at
of
the
Mamet's
picture.
finest moments. Yeah,
so much violence. Like,
don't you think that's a weird way to sum up? I mean, I'm not even kidding. That right there is the problem.
Yeah,
that we see this nice sentimental picture, and he responds with so much violence. Not like what great guys they were, or like what times we had. Like he responds to that and says
like all that's
so
left
much
is
violence.
him and Giuseppe Petri. You know,
that's just such a weird way to respond. Is so much violence
I
to see in the picture.
It seems like it's a movie.
But again, like I said, I think her reaction's telling, because I don't even have to have seen that show to know there's probably always a moment, if not every episode, regularly, of like, we've got this person who's about to talk, or we've got this thing that's about to get us there, and then Capone gets them, and then man, setback. How are we gonna get him? And then the next episode, we get a little closer, and then there's a setback. Like, you know, I can just imagine. I don't even have to watch the show to know that's
I already
probably
know
what
what's
happens.
going on there.
Like, you know.
You know what's funny though is the clips they showed in that Mystery of Al Capone's Vaults last week literally look like a Western that just so happened to be men in suits with Tommy guns. Like the town literally looked like.
I mean, that was
like
what
filmed,
50s TV
like it was near
anyways.
Bronson Cave or something. Like, you know,
that's what 50s TV was anyways.
Right. It's all just a Western because it's California.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on the Untouchables?
Nah, it sucks.
And again, this is a widely beloved movie by a lot of people.
It's wild, I'll tell you that. It really is amazing how a movie could be this stupid and people like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, because even Dick Tracy, which is pretty beloved, is like, yeah, okay, I can understand why people be into that. It's like a cartoon intentionally the way it is, but yeah, no, let's not do that.
It was reported as a canceled prequel section on the Wikipedia page. It was reported on July 2nd, 2004 that Antoine Fuqua would direct an Untouchable spin-off titled The Untouchables Mother's Day.
This is not real. Are you serious?
Yeah. Which was later changed to Capone Rising. You gotta go with Mother's Day, though. You know what I mean? It's like you already commit to
Capone Rising?
Yeah. The film's script, which was written by Brian Koppelman and David Levine, who were behind Billions and other things, focused on the rise of Chicago mob kingpin Capone in the years before the encounter with Ness and Law
and Giuseppe Petri
and his lawmen. In June of the following, what if it said that like for his encounter with Ness, Giuseppe Petri, and other lawmen? Like, in June the following year, original director Brian De Palma replaced Fuqua on the film. According to De Palma, the film went in development several times with Nicolas Cage, Gerard Butler, and Benicio del Toro all attached to play Capone at different stages.
Who is the middle one there, you said?
Gerard Butler. So, Nicolas Cage, Gerard Butler, and Benicio del Toro were going to play different stages of Capone.
Like this is like this is I'm Not There or something.
There was a side-scrolling video game also, it says.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like for the NES?
It says on multiple platforms. It came out in 1989, side-scrolling video game.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
The game plays some of the more significant parts of the film. Look, set in Chi-Town, it says in the Wikipedia page. Primary goal of the game is to take down Al Capone's henchmen and eventually detain Capone. Yeah, here's the what the cover looks like.
Ocean made it. Yeah, it sucked. I've heard they always make bad games.
Platforms, let's see. It was Commodore 64, Amistad CPC, basically computers, and then also NES and SNES.
Yeah, mostly computers, the Amigas and Atari ST. Yeah. Anyway, I never knew that though. Yeah, I'm sure it was as bad as the movie.
Speaking of bad movies, since we're on the topic.
Since we're on topic of bad movies,
here is the trailer for Public Enemies.
What is it exactly you do for a living?
John Dillinger, robbed banks.
That's a serious thing to say to a girl you just met.
I like baseball, movies, good clothes, fast cars, and you. What else you need to know?
Today, I am declaring United States of America's first war on crime.
Your task will be to get John Dillinger. Are you up to that task, Agent Purvis?
Absolutely, sir.
We are pursuing hardened killers.
Play a game, Mr. President. It's called Spin the Dial. That's your money, mister?
Yes.
We're here for the bank's money, not yours. Put it away.
Well, the whole country thinks you're a damn hero.
Robbing banks is getting tougher. We're having too good a time today. We ain't thinking about tomorrow.
Yeah, well, you ought to.
Johnny!
Put some clothes on, miss.
They're extraditing you.
Where to?
Indiana.
Why? I have absolutely nothing I want to do in Indiana.
Johnny, how long does it take you to go through a bank?
About 1 minute, 40 seconds. Flat. Well, here's a man who killed pretty boy Chloe.
Only way that you would leave a jail cell is when we take you out to execute you.
Well, we'll see about that.
John Dillinger has given us a second chance to get John Dillinger.
He could be anywhere.
Where are you going?
Anywhere I want. We're too good for them. They ain't tough enough, smart enough, or fast enough. I hit any bank I want anytime. They got to be at every bank, all the time. What if we could get out of here all together? You want to take that ride with me?
Yeah, I want to take that ride with you.
Now that was a supremely bad trailer. I just want to say, like,
Also, the trailer itself, tonally inconsistent. I would say one reason I think why this movie. I mean, I think these movies are pretty closer than I would like in quality overall. But one thing that separates Michael Mann from Brian De Palma is that Michael Mann makes movies, even the ones that aren't as great or the ones I don't love, that are tonally consistent and feels like they're,
that fixes a lot of problems. Even if your movie isn't,
it at least makes it feel better. Even though, like in the
grand scheme,
grand
it's still not
scheme
great.
is
Yeah,
probably
but,
not as
yeah,
good.
but no, that's a big problem with Untouchables that it can't solve. This one, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stupidity going on, but it's easier to live with.
So, Public Enemies is a 2009 American biographical crime drama film directed by Michael Mann.
He ain't going to see no Shirley Temple picture.
Who co-wrote the screenplay with Ronan Bennett and Ann Bitterman. It's an adaptation of Brian Burroughs' 2004 nonfiction book, Public Enemies, America's Greatest Crime Wave and the Birth of the FBI, 1933-1934, set during the Great Depression, which this movie, by the way, does a better job of also depicting, I feel like.
Well, yeah, because technically 1930
is early Depression.
Yeah, but they never really talk about that in the movie at all, and yeah.
But, well, I feel like, don't you think, like, just because you are, I mean, the Depression is what spawned these bank robbers. So, I mean, I feel like inherently that is more part of the narrative.
And why they were seen as heroic, like these Western figures, you know.
Yeah, they didn't spawn the bank robbers, but they were the backdrop through which they operated under,
right.
I should say.
And, yeah, we'll talk more about this movie as a Western later, I think.
The film chronicles the final years, spoiler alert, of the notorious bank robber John Dillinger, played by Jonathan Dett, friend of the pod, as we know. Not really. As he is pursued by FBI agent Milton Purvis, Christian Bale, Dillinger's relationship with Billy Frechette, played by Marion Cotillard, as well as Purvis's Pursuit. Purvis's Pursuit. That could have been the name of the movie.
Yeah. No, that should have been Public Enemies, the sequel, Public Enemies, Purvis's Pursuit.
I don't know how that one ends. Death by his own hand. Of Dillinger's associate and fellow criminals, John Red Hamilton, played by Jason Clarke, Homer Van Meter, Stephen Dwarf, Harry Pierpont, David Wenham, and Babyface Nelson, Stephen Graham. Originally, this was supposed to be a miniseries. That would have actually, I think, could have been, had the potential to be good. You know, in a longer
more time.
form.
Yeah.
But decided, Burrow originally wanted it to be a miniseries, but then decided to write a book on the subject instead. So maybe he was originally going to write a miniseries, but then decided, I'm going to just write this book, about nonfiction book. Mann developed the project, and some scenes were filmed on location where they occurred, though the film is not entirely historically accurate. I always love, so for the Untouchables, it was 2 sentences in when it said that. We're a little further down on the main listing here before it says that, but...
what's funny is a lot of the events actually are historically accurate. They're just done out of sequence and in different situations. It's weird. It's strange.
I mean, it's classic Hollywood. We're going to streamline this for... And I don't even have as big of a problem with that as much as I'm sounding like I do.
With this, that's not this movie's problem. Is more. I mean, that is something that is part of it, but it's I can get over that if the movie's fine enough, which,
So, the budget was somewhere between 80 to 100 million. The box office was 214 million, so it was lightly successful. Again, as I said, screenplay by Ronan Bennett, Ann Bitterman, and Michael Mann, directed by Michael Mann. I think Michael Mann's the place to start as opposed to end with this one, because we've already seen him do versions of this story before, most famously Heat.
We've talked about him with Heat,
Yeah, and so, I mean, he's the master of the cat and mouse bank robber movie.
Yeah, because it's interesting. And I think where we can kind of go between him and De Palma is, I think it's the same thing you were talking about, is this the white hat and the black hat. I mean, that's literally what Brian De Palma does his whole career. Every movie feels like a version of that. I mean, because you even had that with Manhunter, as far as chasing a serial killer. You had that with Heat, obviously. Had it with Collateral as a slight version of that.
But don't you feel like with some of these, they play with the tension of we're not so different, you and I.
Yes, and that is where
so
that
Heat
is the
especially.
difference. That's the difference. Is that there's this whole kind of we're kind of similar and right. This is it tries to do that, and it's just no.
So there's one moment that to me just sticks out like a sore thumb. We talked about it when we watched it. It's one of the few scenes that Dett and Bale have together is when he got arrested when he was, when he got arrested kind of in the middle of the movie before he's getting ready to be transferred, but then he breaks out or whatever of that.
Yeah.
Where they have this scene. I don't remember what exactly is it Det says where he's like, before Bale's walking away, he says something like, maybe you need to find another line of work.
Yeah.
Or something, and there's this moment that just sinks like an anchor to me. This shot of Christian Bale's face as he's walking away,
and he's standing
and
there,
he's standing there like, maybe he's right. Or there's some nonverbal thing going on that is, to me, just sticks out like a sore thumb.
Trying to be the heat scene, yeah.
Especially knowing we're gonna get to death by his own hand ending later on. I feel like it's just trying to set that up, and yeah, that's the thing, is that the natural, relationship between Dillinger and Purvis in real life was not the relationship that of Macaulay. What's their names in Heat?
Macaulay and oh Lord,
Al Pacino's character.
Yeah.
But that relationship that they have, and again, that is like mostly
Vincent Hanna.
Yeah. Mostly summarized by a single scene, right? I mean, the diner scene is one of the most iconic scenes in film history, right? I mean,
and you're watching them act off each other, their own versions of themselves, like, let me buy you a cup of coffee. And he, like, looking around like a robot, like, okay, like, And yeah, like that feels very lived in and organic, and it's weird to say anything in that movie feels organic. Heat, because it feels very cool and mechanical. It's a book about metals, but yeah, no, that feels like, okay, yeah, this is where we're going, and we've got two actors who are definitively on the pulse, not only of what this movie is, but are great actors in their own right, are actors of their generations. There's like a whole interplay there that isn't really the case at all here.
And so I think one of the problems with this movie, and I think this movie isn't all that good, but it doesn't feel as offensively bad as The Untouchables is, mostly because the tone is consistent, is that Michael Mann's kind of been here and done that, and it's not like, what are you doing new, right? Because every Scorsese gangster movie has a new or different element to the one that came before it, right? Mm-hmm. And you might be thinking, oh, here he goes bringing up Scorsese again. You know why I bring up Scorsese? Because he's literally the greatest director of crime films that exists. So, of course, he's the gold standard, right? He's who everybody who works in this mode since him is trying to be in, right?
Yeah.
Like Mean Streets, Goodfellas. Even look at Goodfellas and Casino, right? Those are very different movies, even though they get compared a lot together. I mean,
one has a... but a
and
lot
then
different.
Departed.
Yeah.
Very different than those.
Yeah. And then
The Irishman very, I mean, so like, they all have different aspects to them. And I think with this, sure, it's set in the 30s. Sure, it's got the clothes and the cars and the guns. And that sound design is very strong in this movie, I will say, in terms of the sound of the weapons is comparable to what we heard in Heat.
It's loud, especially for a early Blu-ray. Actually is pretty loud, which is like, because this is one of the oldest Blu-rays that either of us owns.
I remember it was one of the first ones I got.
Yeah, so it does still, I mean, you have to turn it up.
Glorious Bastards is another one I remember.
You have to turn it up, but it still does sound pretty loud.
So I think, again, with this, it's not even that it's that bad. It's just, well, Mann's kind of been here and done that, so...
It's half-baked.
Especially after, like... Collateral as being a different-ish kind of crime movie for him, and that is a good guy / bad guy divide, but that's got not only Tom Cruise's great performance, but a really strong Jamie Foxx performance as well. So it's just gotten, and then even Miami Vice, like that.
Collateral also has a very strong. Mark Ruffalo haircut in it, like
every once in a while I've not seen it in a while, and I'll see that, and I'm like, I'll see that particular, like, wait, he looks like that, and then again I forget.
Yeah,
but I don't think as highly of Miami Vice as a lot of other people, but it is pretty good, and it is like him doing a take on that, which he already had done years before, so it was him re-dipping his toes into that.
Yeah,
so there was a novelty there. This, again, it's like, it's fine, but it's like...
And even Ali, which I haven't seen, would be
and
like
that's different, at least, by doing a biopic and about Muhammad Ali. And Will Smith, I remember being pretty good in that. But, I don't know. It's just... And a lot of it, again, I think there's part of that, okay, so what, that has to do with Jonathan Dett's lead role in this, too. Yeah. It's just like, okay... what are we doing here? What are we? And now I will say, even at the time, now this was back in 2009, and this was a classic end of sophomore year summer, me and Philip going to see this at the movie kind of movie, I remember. And literally when I put this up on...
Didn't you go see it down at the AMC in, like, Burlington or something? Am I, like, misremembering that? I feel like...
No, I'd go. I think I was in Hickory, I think.
Oh, okay.
But,
well, maybe that I remember going down there.
At the time.
Maybe I went down there and it was playing at the time or something. And I remember that, and I was wanting to see it or something. I can't remember, but
you know,
I don't know why I remember that, but there's something to that. But anyway,
I can't remember where I was going with this. But just I remember at the time thinking, so like this was the first movie it felt like in a while that Dett, and that's his name, Jonathan Dett. Let's not forget. That I was like, he's not doing a Tim Burton movie,
or like
just
a Pirates
again,
movie.
or that. And so because the 2000s were dominated by him doing one or the other of those two things, right?
And so he followed this up even with Alice in Wonderland right afterwards. So,
so to me it was like, it's like him doing something a little different, and then he's just in it, and it's like one of the like most ghostly lead performances I can even think of in any movie. Lead role.
You're not
specifically.
Going anywhere. You hear me? Anywhere.
Let me even give him the benefit of the doubt for a second when I ask this question. Do you think that was his interpretation of who a man like that was, and that was that there's something behind that performance? What do you think of him in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's bad, kind of bad. Well, no, I shouldn't say. I don't think he's bad. He's just not there, like I said. It's just very... Vacant. But part of that, I think... fits the movie in a certain sense of not for the movie to be good, but I think it fits the character in the sense of that's really kind of how a lot of these people were. Was they literally robbed bank, especially John Dillinger.
And they saw themselves as working class individuals,
right. Especially John Dillinger, who didn't have the big he kind of looked like anybody else. He didn't have this big personality like Babyface Nelson. He had a certain
ruggedly handsome quality to himself, the real Dillinger.
But no, I'm saying, but he just kind of looked like whoever.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like young and kind of like infested with rickets looking like Bonnie and Clyde were.
Yeah.
And like, he was very average compared to all these other...
But then in some ways was among the most prolific ones.
Right. And well, it's partially probably because he was that successful because he kind of looked like just a guy,
Yeah.
And I assume that's probably how John Dillinger was as a person. I don't really know. I don't know an awful lot about John Dillinger outside of...
I read this Burroughs book years ago, partly inspired by this movie, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember really loving it and learning a lot. And that book is not even just about Dillinger. It's about Bonnie and Clyde, who, of course... Does there ever need to be another Bonnie and Clyde movie? And I say that because the Arthur Penn Bonnie and Clyde, while not even totally historically accurate, is so iconic. How could you even...
That's more or less... I mean, it is...
How could you even play in that sandbox again?
Right.
But also about Alvin Karpus, who is in this barely. Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, all them.
Yeah.
And basically that whole wave of individuals. Yeah. And so Dillinger plays a big role in that, but there's all these other things. I think it actually was smart to just do Dillinger in this.
And then have a couple of the other ones in it.
I think that actually was the right decision because I think the movie would have got bogged down if it's doing too many of those things. Now, if it was a miniseries, maybe it would have had space to breathe and kind of be about.
Well, we've seen versions of this too, like the crappy versions of it, like the History Channel doing like, here's the Babyface Nelson story, here's the John Dillinger story, and... Yeah, to the point where I say I do think that probably what John Dillinger kind of was as a guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, but that's what makes a movie like Bonnie and Clyde, which I'm not even. The more I see it, the more I like it. But you're way more of a fan of it than me. But that movie has so much life to it. I mean, like.
That was, of course, one of the big starts of New Hollywood.
Right, it's just so bombastic, not only stylistically, but just the performances, the personalities. Like Warren Beatty, in particular, is a real standout in that because he has this false confidence about himself that he projects that I see in so many, being around young people all the time.
Yeah, right.
I know he's older than they are.
Yeah.
I teach middle schoolers, but
I mean,
yeah.
But I mean, the character is not that much old, not as older as you would think either, though.
But I think of even my favorite kids has a lot of them have this. One in particular, I'm thinking of, have this kind of confidence about themselves that masks this lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And they're very good at doing that around most people.
Yeah.
But that I think is so specific, and I think about that movie because there's that big scene, which was a big deal at the time, that kind of love scene between them, and he's impotent and can't perform, and that being such a big thing in a movie because I'd never seen anything
especially
like
somebody
that
that looks
in a
like
movie.
Warren Beatty.
Yeah,
that happened with,
right.
and a lot of his
Yeah.
best roles in the '70s, which is one of the reasons I love him so much, are like poking holes in this sense of hollow masculinity,
which is strange for somebody as vain as him.
Yeah, right.
And I say
handsome
that
as him, too,
as a fan of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just has so much life to it and feels like a runaway train of a movie. This doesn't really feel like that, and I mean because this feels like, and all of these are in that type of Western milieu of we're going for the last ride, and all this is gonna run out someday, and like.
And that way, there's a lot of similarities with the Wild Bunch, I guess.
Right,
with this movie.
and it's
not stylistically, but like the narrative. Yeah.
And I'm not saying you couldn't still do movies like this. You think about literally in a movie I've been thinking about talking about Public Enemies now is the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Literally came out 2 years before this. Same type of idea of like this, legendary outlaw figure killed by someone. And that movie feels cold in a lot of ways too. But the difference is also the narration of that movie just elevates it to another level of saying this is this big story, and that movie's also interrogating the idea of a Wild West legacy and what did it mean to be famous for being a murderer. Like, this is a lot. This movie would have done better to interrogate that about John Dillinger, about what is it that the people think about him. Him as this heroic figure. Like, it brings that up here and there, but it honestly focuses too much on the empty romance between him and Marion Cotillard.
I mean, what is the least bit interesting about their scenes? I mean, Det has moments of he can act. I don't, in other movies, Cotillard is a great actress. I think those scenes are so paint by numbers. They're there, so it's like, oh, that's the expectation of that's what happens in these movies, and these scenes are to build this sense of romance between them. But again, it just feels
if
so
they would have
like,
had a longer movie,
like it's connecting dots more than anything
If they
else.
would have had a longer movie to work with, they should have emphasized her Native American ancestry. Somehow made something out of that with this working class background that Dillinger says he's part of.
Yeah.
But then he's totally white, and like there's something interesting there. The dots aren't connecting. I don't know what it is, but there's something in between the lines there that I'm interested in that the movie isn't. So,
one of the reasons, one of the biggest reasons people love Michael Mann's films and the subject of Michael Mann's films is that they can be process oriented. That some people are like, well, it ain't about the character. It's like this competency porn, which sometimes people talk about, of like, it's just about people doing their jobs, and whether they do it legally or illegally, it's just about seeing that process work. Right now, something like Thief, which was some years earlier, is in some ways a process film in terms of being about literally a safe cracker, right? But the spark of James Caan is what gives that movie the life that it has, right? And the way that it looks, and it all that score, it all just kind of comes together. And again, this movie just feels like it's just kind of connecting the dots. It's just kind of listless. It's just kind of doing what the expectation is. Another thing about Michael Mann to mention around this time is that a few years before, he was maybe going to do The Aviator. He was supposed to do a Howard Hughes movie. And for whatever reason, that fell through, and we got Scorsese's version, which is very inspired and very odd and very weird and off kilter. And
I'm not saying Mann's version wouldn't have been good, but I could see that
been
a
more
lot
conventional,
more. Right? And I don't feel like I said. I feel like the manicness the manic nature of Scorsese's style fits Hughes far more than the kind of cold, calculated style of Mann.
And don't you
would.
feel like,
So,
especially in the early portions, that Scorsese's depiction of the Jazz Age, in a similar way to how Chazelle depicted the Jazz Age in Babylon, actually makes it feel new and fresh and perverse again. You know what I mean? It feels like
what I assume New York would have kind of felt like, even though that was in the 40s before Pearl Harbor.
And so, I think Scorsese does a great job of giving the past life again and making the past feel
that way. Like I said, Gangs of New York, I think you just mentioned, is a version of that too. Of like making it feel dirty and nasty to live in New York in that time. That something like The Gilded Age, for example, which is a great TV show, but doesn't do that. It doesn't feel, because that's all these rich people in New York. And then it's like, I know that was before that in time, but it's like, well, look over there. Look at all that madness going on over there, so
I think
it's very Cimino-esque in that way, as far as the Gangs of New York.
And I think Mann, just by contrast, is like, while he's a very talented director in his own right, is fixated on more of this like law and order / coolness of being and vibe that sometimes feels a little too modern for what the time would have felt like, you know what I mean, in a real way. Now, sure, they've got all the production design. The production design's there, right? I mean, the movie's had a good budget. It looks on paper like it's of this period until we really notice the digital photography of the movie, which is one of the things that, again, Mann's a huge fan of and an advocate for. And there are certain scenes that I will just go as far as to say do not look good. Do not look good in terms of the digital photography.
I said the problem with that is that it's a period movie, so you've got to let a period movie look really good, because especially if you're looking dated like that, then it's like, okay, well, it looks so monochromatic too. I mean, kind of like what the Untouchables looks pretty monochromatic actually. But
Mann's more known for that anyways across the board. Right. And I mean, meanwhile, I feel like most of De Palma's movies are more colorful by nature.
But that really doesn't work when you're shooting it with the digital cameras from the 2000s. Like, it
takes you out of it.
It doesn't look right. I mean, because you see the way that looks, and I think Inland Empire, or even Collateral, which actually is one of the better looking versions of that kind of movie, actually looks really good for being digital.
I think Fincher with, like, say, Zodiac achieved a really great digital look for a time period, like an older time period.
That was very successful.
And I mean, there are good ways to do this in this time period. I think again, Fincher achieves that with Zodiac.
And he could do that with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and The Social Network, which are more modern movies, so that works. But those movies look really good to be digital. And to be kind of flat looking, though, at the same time. Like, the colors aren't very striking. But here, it really is, it really takes you out of the movie. Some scenes look fine. It's not the whole movie either. That's what's weird. I think when it's handheld, that's when it goes off the rails
I feel like
more. But
for him, that was probably part of the novelty to make this movie. Is like, I'm going to do like a period movie set in the 30s, but I'm going to do it like handheld and digital, because nobody's seen that period look like that before. So I'm sure part of him for
because
that
it didn't look like that.
But, but just was to do this thing that nobody had exactly done before with the period. But again, a lot of that just comes off to me as, again, it looks dated. I mean, it looks like, I mean, now we watch it because digital's come a long way, obviously, and even in all these years, that it does instantly look like a 2000s era digital movie, in that way. So that's just the reality of it. But then there's, again, Christian Bale, we should maybe talk a little bit about, as Melvin Purvis.
Oh, okay.
No, not quite that.
Not quite that. No, just not. But anyway.
You know what's interesting is it says Bale said he, quote, never viewed Purvis as having a real personal zeal for taking down Dillinger. I think he was somebody who was very understanding and acknowledging, while the public felt Dillinger to be almost a hero. He wasn't unaware of the problems of the day and the terrible deprivation of the majority of the population. I don't know how to say it. Christian Bale is one of our finest actors in terms of in modern era. he tries a little accent in this, that is kind of funny.
Midwest,
laugh at. But
Southern, something.
He himself comes off as a kind of a working class G-man, and again, the FBI.
Well, the difference between
which
him
the
and
origin of the FBI is kind of taking place in the background of this movie, and usually that's actually where I'd rather be seeing the story be told as far as that goes, because we'll talk about Billy Crudup in a little bit as J. Edgar Hoover, but those scenes are the ones I feel like are the most electric to me and the ones I'm most interested in. But what do you take away from Christian Bale's Melvin Purvis in this?
It's important to note, too, that Purvis was way more of a go out and do it kind of guy compared to what Ness actually was. Like, Melvin Purvis actually went out and got into shootouts with people and stuff. I mean, he would actually go out and do the stuff.
Yeah.
Ness was a little bit more of actually administrator of I'm doing this, and but yeah, I think that Bale is really pretty good in this. I mean, he's working as hard as he can with what he's got. I know that. I mean, you can see through the performance to the point where he's trying really hard. Sometimes maybe too hard. I don't know. Especially compared to Debt. I mean, he's just on autopilot. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think he's good. But I don't. It's weird. It doesn't. Like I said, that whole back and forth does not at all. Obviously, as we said, live up to the Heat, De Niro, and Pacino thing. Because Bale and Debt aren't really a good match either. I don't think.
No,
they're too different.
Yeah.
And so, because one's a great actor and one's not. So first of all,
but don't you think it's like trying to be this De Niro Pacino?
But it's not. It
divide?
Doesn't work. Yeah, it just doesn't work. I don't know. And seeing them together. It's actually better that the movie has them apart because it really doesn't fit anyway.
Well, this movie kind of, in various times, takes place over a vast amount of spaces.
Yeah.
When, like, something like Heat, the whole thing's taking place in Los Angeles, so there's more of, that demand. I want to talk about Melvin effing Purvis. Like, let's talk about Melvin effing Purvis in real life, because the ending of this movie has, to me, one of the most memorable, shocking, ambiguous revelations. At the very end, you see this with a lot of movies based on people that it, like, says, oh, this is what happened to him after, or whatever. That in real life, and this was talked about in the book that I remember, too, that Purvis resigned from the FBI in 1935 and afterwards practiced also. Pretty quickly after this era happened, he resigned and left, being involved in the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
He would actually go on to serve in the United States Army as an intelligence officer during World War II, reached the rank of colonel. He assisted with compiling evidence against Nazi leaders in the Nuremberg trial, actually, believe it or not.
I think I'd heard that before somewhere. But
so his death, though, which me and Levi joke all the time about, died by his own hand, which implies directly it was suicide. Let's just not, According to Wikipedia here, it says, on February 29th, which is an unlucky day to begin with, I guess, only one that comes every 4 years, 1960, Purvis was at his home in Florence, South Carolina, when he died from a gunshot wound to the head. The shot was fired from his pistol that was given to him by fellow agents when he resigned from the FBI. The FBI suggested his death and investigated his death and declared it as suicide, although the official coroner's report did not label the cause of death as such. Later investigation suggested that Purvis may have shot himself accidentally while trying to extract a tracer bullet. He was 56 years old, so we don't know, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he did want to commit suicide, but I just find it incredibly, what's the word? Like, I don't know exactly dishonest, but misleading on man's part to say died by his own hand, because that directly involves or suggests suicide. While that's technically could fly in terms of the accuracy of it, but what do you have any thoughts on that? That idea,
I mean, it to me it does sound like it was just a random thing that happened. But either way, like I said, it's too up in the air to even make a statement as like misleading as that.
But don't you feel like that's trying to say, well, he was conflicted about all the things he took part in,
right?
So he later killed himself. That's I feel like what the movie's suggesting, like in terms of what that character was about.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a totally misleading factoid.
Now again, maybe he did. We don't know,
but you know what else is kind of an
like
important
you said, there's
thing?
enough ambiguity there.
An important piece of information that's totally left out is that Anna Sage, the Eastern European woman that basically was threatened with being deported unless she helped him get to Dillinger, that she literally was deported after that. They basically lied and sent her back. That's not at all at the end. I feel like that's something you need to add at the end is, oh, by the way,
that would have added
happened.
to the moral ambiguity of the whole thing.
Yeah, and they just left that out because I know that. So that's part of the movie to me, but most people don't know that, so it's just whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
Marion Cotillard as Billy Frechette, singer and coat check girl who immediately becomes John Dillinger's love interest.
I'll just be honest, I really have nothing to say about her in this movie.
Paint by numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nothing. I don't know. I mean,
I feel like
I hate to just be that, like, I don't know, but
I feel like towards the beginning she feels a little conflicted that he's a criminal and that, but I feel like as the movie goes on she doesn't really care anymore.
Yeah.
And not that there's anything wrong with that in terms of the narrative of the movie. But again, this is an example, and this happens in Hollywood all the time, of like hot, new, young European actress being brought over to be the starstruck by the American hunk in the American movie. You know what I mean? It's just a very long tradition of that. So the performance of the movie, though, arguably, as Billy Crudup, as J. Edgar Hoover. I love, by the way, on Wikipedia here, it says, Crudup was cast as the future director by the Federal Bureau of Investigation by April 28, 2008.
Yeah, it's like, why did I need to know the specific date?
What do you think of Billy Crudup generally, and what do you think of Billy Crudup in this movie?
Billy Crudup's great.
Yep, we love
He
Billy
elevates
Crudup.
any movie he's in immediately.
Well, specifically, we love 20th Century Women, which he's in.
I think he is really pretty good in Big Fish.
Jackie's got a small role, but Camelot.
And I know he's
Camelot.
Camelot, yeah. That's such a hilarious
Almost
moment.
Famous, he's really good in.
I haven't seen that yet, but I've always heard that.
I think, isn't he on the morning show or that news show? I think he's got
he's in some TV
now
show.
Married to Naomi Watts, I think, too.
I think so.
They've been, I think, married recently.
Yeah, something like that. I'm
or
trying
Giuseppe
to think of
Petri one. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, Where'd You Go, Bernadette? He was in. He was in Justice League as Henry Allen. Who was that? I don't know. Alien Covenant. He was in. I remember.
Didn't he die towards the beginning of it? Or?
Yeah, he wasn't in it very long. Yeah, he was in that morning show.
He goes all
He was in that The Last Movie Stars show. He was one of the voices in that as James Goldstone.
Don't you think he goes all in on this accent in this movie, though?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, and also, I know an above average amount about J. Edgar Hoover, I'd say.
One of the all-time weirdos in American history.
He's so weird.
That was as powerful as he was. Arguably one of the most powerful men of the 20th century.
Oh, yeah,
American life,
and it's strange how he got to that point. Like, who allowed that? And then it was like it was too late.
It basically first came of note in the late teens, early 20s, going after
didn't he work
communists
with,
and the Red Scare.
The Palmer raids and stuff?
Raids he was involved with.
So, and I mean, that was honestly what I think of him more as a anti-communist kind of crusader rather than as in this vein.
Which he eventually became even more so in the 40s and the 50s.
So because I feel like that's where he started and where he ended, more or less. Notably, the first person Nixon called after the JFK assassination, we can never forget.
Yeah.
But
which that right there tells you who has all the power.
Right, yeah.
If Nixon knows who to call, himself a weird goblin overlord.
Right. But so yeah, I think that he is really good in this. It's a gonzo performance in its own way.
Yeah.
But I feel like it fits the movie relatively. Also, like I said, he makes the movie better for being in it. He was also the same could be said for Watchmen the same year.
Oh yeah, he's
as
amazing.
Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
I think that might even maybe be his best performance.
It's
I don't
up
know.
there, yeah.
And which is another movie that isn't good and is like, oh wow, this is actually really great.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that too is that you can actually live up to the single greatest comic book in comic book history. I think is the Dr. Manhattan origin story
most
in
people
Watchmen.
agree. People who like or don't like Watchmen, that sequence is.
Yeah,
the best thing about that
right.
movie,
And it's like you actually can live up to that cinematically,
Yeah.
and so that's the best thing Zack Snyder's ever done by far. I mean,
but again, seeing Billy Crudup in this as J. Edgar Hoover makes me want to see him in the J. Edgar Hoover movie,
the J. Edgar Hoover story.
Yeah, but because I think I've not seen it in a long time since it came out. But J. Edgar, which was the DiCaprio,
and
Eastwood,
tell him he can call me J.
She says in this,
Sorry,
so weird.
Jump in there.
Oh gosh, what was the guy who was his buddy?
He was like
Tolson,
had a
Tolson that's believed
that he had like a relationship with.
Well, that's what we
think. Because it's pretty much known that J. Edgar Hoover was gay. But Tolson,
Clyde Tolson,
yeah,
was his
right.
name, yeah. Anyways, he appears kind of in the background in this movie too. Also, don't forget he's one of the best Don DeLillo characters ever in Underworld, of course.
Right. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Because then there's all the stuff at the end with him and that nun.
Yeah,
it's like
in
what,
in like heaven or somewhere together.
In the chords of computers or something.
No, interestingly, I heard I saw this DeLillo Q&A one time, and somebody brought up how amazing the book was and how much the ending surprised him, and he immediately retorted, "Yeah, imagine how much it surprised me." Like, it's like I guess this is how it's going to end.
Yeah, but there's just so many quotes from this movie though that we say all the time. Specifically, yeah, tell him he can call me J.E. and also tell him he can call G.E. Like, and then also the stuff about suspects need to be interrogated vigorously, grilled, and
the white gloves,
as they're saying in Italy these days, take off the white gloves,
which is very clearly a fascist
Mussolini thing,
fascist
right? And so it's like, well, that fits him. But no, he is good, and it's one of those things. I don't necessarily wish there were more of him in it because he's actually in quite a bit of it.
Right. I just kind of want to see a whole other movie,
right?
With him as J. Edgar Hoover, with the same accent, but more lines that we can quote all the time. You know.
Yeah.
Some other cast members.
One thing I want to say also, that part where Bale calls him and is like, "We cannot get the job done. I cannot hear you." Like, I still cannot hear you.
He thinks he's going to get the hint and say, "Okay, I won't keep repeating."
No,
but
he's
he keeps repeating it.
I can't do it. Yeah. Another thing that it'll probably be my Instagram video for this episode, but I wanted to mention was he was in a place. He was cold. He bought a coat. That Christian Bale talking about tracing the coat that this real nice coat that John Dillinger left behind, and he was in a place. He was cold. He bought a coat.
And that, I feel like we laugh at that, but, as we should. But you know, there's a lot of things in this movie, not to the extent of something like White Heat, which we love and talk about a lot, and you know, but of like modern methods of criminology.
Right. Yeah.
Making obsolete these type of people and these type of criminals, and I feel like that's happening in a big way in the background of this movie.
Right. We can run through the rest of this cast a lot quicker.
Let's just like run through some of the other hoods that are there, and we'll kind of address them very briefly.
Yeah.
Stephen Dwarf as Homer Van Meter, Jason Clarke as John Red Hamilton, which I love here. It says Dillinger's oldest friend and close advisor. Like he's his advisor.
He advised him on what gun to use. Like I just like,
I mean, it makes it sound like he's a political candidate.
Well, you remember there's that scene of them like sitting down, messing with their guns, and he's like, this one keeps jamming. Like, yeah, did he like say, I think that one's jammed. You need to unjam that one. Like, I don't know.
Don't you think like it should have been like? I feel like an alternate reality version of this movie was one I just think about Jim Jarmusch doing instead of Michael Mann, because he's worked with Depp before, and it's like Tom Waits and like Iggy Pop is like being the crew behind Dillinger. That version would have been interesting.
He's like, my time's up. Like, you know, is it Tom Waits is.
Yeah. He would die by his own hand.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Stephen Graham as George Babyface Nelson, who thankfully we later got to see Stephen Graham himself play Al Capone in Boardwalk Empire. To me, I mean, I don't know about for you too, is that going to be the defining Al Capone depiction for you in media? I mean, I feel like that.
It was Stephen Graham,
Stephen Graham in Boardwalk Empire. I feel like that actually had, because he was bombastic, but it also allowed all these human moments, like all the stuff with him and his deaf son. I mean, that is like a really lived in.
Well, he gets
had time
the
to
most
breathe,
right.
moment of Al Capone.
Yeah.
I feel like, and he's terrific. He's actually a really great actor that I wish was in more stuff. Because he plays these type of roles really well. I mean, he plays George Babyface Nelson as this live wire crazy type, which I think would probably not be that far off from who he was. It sounds like you know. One of the all-time great screen deaths, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, and it was pretty much the way it happened in real life. But like I said, in a totally different time. Like, that's what's so stupid, too. Is like, Pretty Boy Floyd's killed at the beginning of the movie. The movie's set in 1933. It happened after both of those deaths. Then Babyface Nelson was killed after John Dillinger.
Yeah, they clearly needed to do all that to establish this is who Purvis is. He's hunting them down, even though that happened later.
Yeah.
So,
and reportedly, from what I've seen, Babyface Nelson really went down shooting, it sounds like. I mean, because I think he had one of the bigger gun battles of a final kind of battle with anybody as him. Because all the other ones, it was like Dillinger kind of tried to run away and got shot. More or less like what happened in the movie. Pretty Boy Floyd, it was kind of like that. Congratulations on Pretty Boy Floyd. But,
even Pretty Boy Floyd, like his death too, that squib blowing up in his stomach,
Oh my God. That's I think about that all the time, just like he gets rocked. Like that's literally one of the biggest deaths ever. And Channing Tatum as him for 2 seconds.
Young Channing Tatum at the time.
Also, I wanted to mention before we moved on, Babyface Nelson was also played by that one guy that was it was in Oh Brother Where Art Thou. And what do you think's the better perform? I know that's kind of a weird question, but
just shout him out real quick.
Yeah.
Michael Badalucco.
Yeah. Who played David Berkowitz in Summer of Sam?
Yeah.
But
probably Oh Brother Where Art Thou. And what I love about that is it's like part of this larger.
It's a more mythical version,
story. I mean that he plays a role in.
Gonna light me up like a Roman candle.
Well, that and also one of my favorite moments in movies. Period is. Sure, boys, here's my plan.
He has all this like dynamite. He says they ain't never seen ordnance like this. Like,
but I mean, he's that whole character in that movie, and I don't think this is a problem.
Yeah,
it's treated as a punchline.
Oh, it's a cartoon.
It's a cartoonish thing.
Right.
I feel like in this, he's just this
hold
crazy,
your applause and drop your draws.
draws.
Yeah. No, because in this, it's showing Babyface Nelson is that way, but also showing his man, he would literally blow people's heads off, like, for no reason.
As it says here, this is based on the Oh Brother Where Art Thou portrayal. When he last appears, he's been taken by an angry mob to meet his death in the electric chair. The film is set in Mississippi in 1937, 3 years after the real Nelson's death.
Yeah,
but who cares,
Yeah.
Now, that whole movie takes place in kind of a mythical forever 30s anyway.
I never even knew exactly when it was, so yeah.
It was only recently when I was reading Robert Caro's masterful books on Lyndon Johnson that I even realized Pappy O'Daniel was the name of the guy that from Texas that Lyndon Johnson lost the 1941 Senate race to. I never even knew
and the
that
whole
before.
Homer Stokes character is basically a sort of version of Huey Long anyway, except for not, I don't think Huey Long was a grand wizard in the KKK, but that I'm aware of. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think he's really good in this though too, but it's a more like menacing version, obviously, that is like, I'm gonna give it to you high and I'm gonna give it to you low, like,
as it says about also the Public Enemy's depiction, it says the film still, because it talks about, there's some inaccurate things. However, the film still portrays Nelson as getting up and continuing to fire immediately after being shot several times. Some hardliner was like, I got to make sure that people know that. Typing up.
Well, then I know it was true. Some of the stuff that happened before the Little Bohemia stuff, that he literally was just like shooting cops out the window before the cops even knew anything was going on. He literally was already shooting them for no reason, and they were all like, what? Like, why are you doing this?
We should talk a little bit about the Little Bohemia section of the movie, because that's one of the most memorable gun battles in the movie, I feel like. And what we joked about watching it's like, Little Bohemia. It's like it's a map on a first-person shooter multiplayer video games. All right, let's do the Little Bohemia map. Like, you know what I mean? It's like what it feels like, and I actually think that's a really great sequence.
Yeah. It's probably the best scene in the whole movie, I think. Really, that whole kind of bank robbery that led to that, and that is probably the best section of the movie overall. I think is pretty good. But
last cast member I want to shout out: Stephen Lang as FBI agent Charles Winstead, a war veteran. Purvis' trusted second in command and one of Dillinger's killers.
He's not his second in command. He was called in from He's a Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
Got called in. He's not his second in command.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get that clear right now.
Yeah.
Okay? Anyway, yeah. But he becomes that slowly. But
this was the first time I ever noticed Stephen Lang before. Of months later, we would see him in Avatar.
Yeah. You're not in Kansas anymore.
I want to say that this is randomly going off on a tangent. Him in Avatar 2, where he's obviously Quaritch,
recombinant,
like his mind put into an Avatar body.
Right.
I remember somebody kind of, I don't know if in passing or in jest, called that character the Darth Vader of this generation. And when I first heard that, I was like, "Slow down! Like, what are you talking about?" But he was amazing in the second Avatar movie. He was. The writing was really good, but also his performance. You can that speaks to the CGI too. That can still be communicated through that was actually really amazing to the point I'm like, I want to see where this goes in the sequels in a way that I don't care about for as much as some of the other characters.
Yeah, because that whole movie is really good.
Yeah,
but obviously great even in its own way. But that was the thing that I think would have sunk the movie, because I remember hearing about that at first, and I knew that the whole Sigourney Weaver thing about the daughter being her kind
spiritually
of like,
somehow,
right, but then all that was really interesting too. I thought that was my favorite stuff in the movie was with that.
But I remember hearing that and kind of immediately bucking up against it,
right.
but then thinking about it, like, you know what, that actually is pretty strong, and I think that's a fair comparison to make.
The recombinant stuff, I was like, oh God, like what are they gonna do with that? And then it was like, oh, okay.
He's not asked for much here, but he does play tough Texas lawman. I think
tough
pretty
Texas T. Like, I mean, he does his role. So he had a good role, one of his best roles yet.
To sum it up, what's the best version of this movie? Like, what's it missing?
I think a better lead.
And I hate to say it, I think somebody other than Michael Mann, just because we're not going to be thinking of it in terms of what a Michael Mann crime movie is.
Like, I mean, obviously we're going to say something like this, but I mean, Jeff Nichols would have been great for it, but he wasn't even known then, really. I mean,
this is a radical suggestion, but like, what if it was like a Wes Anderson? We got Wes Anderson's version, his version of what 30s America is and 30s crime figures are, and you get these little sections. Oh, here's Pretty Boy Floyd, and here's what Pretty Boy Floyd looks like and is. And here, you know what I mean, like a much more fantastical, almost look than this.
Make it like a radio. Make it like a radio show almost.
Right, and I feel like this is good. I mean, there's not good. I mean, let me scratch that. But it's like it's fine. But it just feels paint by numbers. It lacks that spark and it lacks that inspiration that somebody like a Wes Anderson definitely would have done something different. You know what I mean? Than this. But any final thoughts on Public Enemies?
Congratulations for Pretty Boy Floyd.
He was in place.
He was in place. He was gold. About gold. Or what was the other one? Was it? He can call me J.
Yeah.
Tell him he can call me J.
I mean, this movie has a lot of moments and scenes we quote from.
And the what was it? I forgot to mention. It was we didn't even talk about Frank Nitti in the movie either. In that whole section,
Bill
of the
Camp
movie,
plays him,
and even Giovanni Ribisi as Alvin Karpus, but
which is almost a cameo. I mean, it's like to tip a hat.
I'm thinking Cuba. I'm thinking Redondo Beach. Like the way he talks is
we need the other movie where he taught Charles Manson how to play the guitar.
The slide guitar. Yeah, steel guitar. Yeah, but then there's also, that part, though, where they're down in Miami and you ain't going anywhere. You hear me? And Jonathan Dett's like, they're going to have to be I can go into any bank, anytime I want. They're going to have to be at every bank all the time. Just like, wow. But yeah. What do you think of Jason Clarke's death in this, by the way?
I'll be honest. Remind me how he died again. Ever. Remind me how
he literally, after he got shot, he was like in the car.
Oh,
and like,
and
he literally just was like, the way his face looked, he looks like Benny Safdie or something, like dying. Like, it was just very nothing burger moment.
There you go.
Well, we also didn't talk about Bye Bye Blackbird though.
Oh gosh. So before we even get into the Bye Bye Blackbird denouement, That we got to talk a little bit about Adam Mucci as Harold Renneck, who's basically this unnamed cop who's working with Purvis and his crew, who very memorably has an interrogation of Cotillard's character where he's yelling and berating her, abusing her, and he's like picks up her chair several times, like, I can't hear you, and like he's yelling at her, and then that's another thing of like Purvis coming back and like, no, this isn't how we do things, and he like takes care of her, you know. Very cheap.
That guy.
That
guy, Adam Mucci, was the goon on
season 1
Boardwalk Empire.
He specialized.
I think
in
he was in the second
moment.
season too, a little bit, but
he might have been.
He was.
I can't remember. He might have been killed. I know
he was, but I think he was
at
least in the second season.
Yeah, you might be right about that. Anyways, there was a particular point in time where you've seen him in several things. I feel like he's kind of disappeared a little bit more recently, but he is prison guard number 2 in Men in Black 3, though.
Also, was in Revolutionary Road, supposedly. I can't hear you. Also, the moment at the end when it's like, and this is the moment where the movie's most tone deaf, I think, out of anything, actually, is when it's like the whole moment where John Dillinger is going to be killed. And then it cuts to him walking down the street pointing the gun.
And he's the one who
like
pulls
he's
the
going to
trigger.
cry.
Yeah. This is my moment of redemption. You know?
But actually it isn't him. It's Lang and the other Texan guy. But yeah, because then he turns and looks. He knows he's there. And he's like, oh man, now I can't do it. Like,
so then Lang shoots and kills Dillinger, but he leans down before Dillinger dies and whispers something to him that he then later tells Purvis, oh, it was nothing, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But then he goes in the final scene of the movie, he goes back and sees Cotillard and says, he said, bye-bye, Blackbird. And
which was this song they dance to all the time.
So it's just like, it really ends on this heavy emotional moment, you know, of like what it's trying to be. But
what if his last words were, Giuseppe Petri? And she's like, what? Like,
she think, who is she? And it's a he.
It's a he.
Yeah.
It's a boy.
I think she's a he. I think he's a changeling.
It's a boy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But what do you think of that moment, genuinely? Like,
it's terrible.
Yeah.
Stupid. Like, I mean, like,
don't you feel like it's just trying to, you know, bask on this unearned emotionality that is just like falls flat?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. That's all there is to it.
Good. Any last thoughts on Public Enemies?
Lean close to his mouth. He said, bye-bye, Blackbird. Like,
and on that note, Jeff Probst. Ooh, before we even get into it, though, Spooktober, Levi. These next 2 episodes that are coming up are going to be your annual Spooktober episodes. I know we don't have a lot of ceremony and repeated traditions necessarily on this show, but this is one that we want to always be
which is funny because we're 2 people that are like, oh, Halloween, a little bit overrated.
But we like Halloween.
Yeah, but we're like, oh, horror fans, and then every year we're like, oh, let's do the Spooktober movie. So, you know.
Heard like horror fans talk about how mad they get about, the normies and the casuals who only get into watching horror around Halloween.
No, I mean, I do it throughout the year, but like, whatever.
But I mean, we like Halloween, and that's why we partake, you know. So, Jeff Probst.
Oh, actually, can I tell a story real quick?
Sorry,
this
Jeff,
literally happened today.
Yeah.
I forgot to tell anybody this yet. So I was in Hobby Lobby looking for some flagpoles that I still couldn't find, randomly. And I'm walking by this married couple. They turn a corner, and they look, and she laughs. And I'm thinking, she's not looking at me. She's like looking over at something. Yeah. And she laughs. And by the way, I want to make it clear, this whole place is decked out in Halloween and Christmas stuff already, you know. It's all, like, she would have had to have seen so much of it already at that point, Halloween stuff. She turns, laughs, and is walking by me, and I hear her say, pagan holiday. I'm like, what? And I'm just like, you've literally been walking around in here for, like, way longer than me at this point, and you've had to have seen all this, and now's when you say that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seemed really... And it wasn't even like the like scarier Halloween stuff. It was just fall stuff. It was like pumpkins and leaves and stuff,
Yeah.
And she says that, and I'm thinking, and by the way, I'm so sick and tired in this culture of people. And I'm saying this also as somebody who's I find horror movie fans annoying, right? Yeah. But at the same time, I'm sick and tired of these people. I don't watch horror movies. I like the cutesy Halloween. I don't like the scary Halloween. The hell with it. I like horror movies and I like scary Halloween. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Like, I'm just saying, you know what I mean, though? Everybody feels so like, I'm not into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, get over
like
it.
That. I mean, again, we live in the, more rural areas of the South where it's still interpreted as this, like, very demonic, like, pagan thing. And so there's a lot of associations with it. That
even though it's inherently actually a Christian holiday, but...
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that I feel like Halloween and Thanksgiving both, not Thanksgiving, Halloween and Christmas both are almost, the Christians complain about Christmas in their own way in terms of how it's been commercialized. But, they're to the point where they're so secularized by this point. Now, again, I as a Christian have deeply held convictions about what Christmas actually means and what Christmas should be about. And we've talked about that here on this podcast.
Yeah, and even from a secular point of view, there's inherently Christian ideologies within that even secular people would agree with.
Yeah,
But.
So, I feel like those holidays now are just, and I love them both in their own way.
There's so things like pagan holidays. Just like, who even says stuff like that anymore? That's just that's just so backwards. Frankly, I'm just like, I don't even know what to say about that. But
Speaking of backwards, we're gonna go backwards in time.
Finally, Jeff, you ready?
Jeff, what have we got next week?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
Könnte ich doch sterben. Nein, Leon. Ich weiß. Ich bin verloren. Ich bin verdammt.
That's staggering, his dying so quickly. In your campaigns, have you never seen men who staggered before they died, who talked incoherently, walked blindly?
I've seen men die drunk, and I've seen men die of the plague.
There's no possibility of that here, is there?
I'll send for Dr. Drosshaus. He'll know. And until he comes, everyone must stay on the island.
We are faced with a very serious form of the plague, septicemic plague. The symptoms are wavering gait, convulsions, weakness, sometimes blindness, and then death, always death. Always death, and very quickly. The illness is highly infectious because there is a grave danger of it spreading to the army, crippling our efforts against the enemy. It has been decided that we all remain here until the disease has run its course.
I have to cross over to the village. Today is market day.
No one may leave the island. I must safeguard the health of my troops.
I'm afraid you'll have to make an exception in my case, General. In my case and my wife's. I'm traveling on urgent business for my government.
No one may leave.
My dear sir, His Majesty's government.
No one may leave the island.
General Farides, I respect your concern and authority, but I must leave the island. There are personal reasons.
I'll be glad to explain my wife's plight.
No one may leave the island.
But you must have observed that my wife is an invalid. What about yourself, General? What about the army?
It's better to have no general than one carrying the plague. The doctor will tell you what to do, and I will see that you do it. We will fight the plague.
you just heard that if you wasn't sure about that first one, which I could understand if you weren't, Vampire from 1930, what? Do we know?
2, I think.
2, 1, somewhere around there.
I don't know.
Vampire from the 30s, early 30s. And Isle of the Dead.
1945, I think.
From 1945.
Yeah.
Both
1932 for Vampire
32.
and
45 for.
We should have looked this up.
Yeah.
we don't really know.
Normally we always usually work from an outline. We did not have an outline this episode. Maybe you'll hear that when we talk.
I don't think so.
We were like, we're not doing a Blue Plate special. We know these movies like the back of our hand. We can go with it. But 2 obviously vampire movies in different ways.
Yeah.
Now, I've not seen Vampire or Isle of the Dead.
I've seen Vampire. I have not seen Isle of the Dead.
We wanted to do kind of a shared theme. I won't tell you what the shared theme of the next episode yet is until we preview it next time. But we want to do some vampire movies. Vampires, obviously, as a subsection of horror movies, very widely popular, really from the birth of cinema. I mean, one of the iconic silent film images is Nosferatu. I mean, that's something that even average people, even if they've not seen that movie, know what that is in a roundabout way.
I almost bought a Blu-ray of that today at Barnes & Noble, but I did not.
Was it a Kino?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't even look at the price. I don't know why I didn't do that. Oh, well.
So Nosferatu, that's obviously iconic. And, I think I first found out about Nosferatu by watching SpongeBob, I think, funny enough. So it'll live on forever through that anyways. But
they literally call him as Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
Yeah, this was so weird.
But Vampire from 1932. Levi, you've seen this.
Yeah.
I've not seen the movie. I've seen moments and clips from it. But what I really love about what I've seen is, and this is true of a lot of silent horror / early sound horror, which this is a part of, is while it's, it's not got the jump scare quality of modern horror movies, what's so haunting, literally and figuratively, about those movies from the 20s and 30s is, again, that they're haunting. They feel like they're from a dream or a nightmare. Yeah. The imagery from those are very rich. What do you really most remember about Vampire?
Yeah, Vampire.
How do you want to preview it going into next episode?
And I can actually read for you here in a second what the summary of the movie is. Carl Theodor Dreyer film, of course, he's most famous for Passion of Joan of Arc, which a lot of people think is, I haven't seen it, one of the best movies ever made. It's highly, highly acclaimed.
Yeah.
But Vampire is a little bit of a different vampire movie. I think that's mainly why we picked it. Kind of. It's also spelled differently, if that tells you anything, the kind of with the Y. But it says traveler Alan Gray arrives in the village of Contempierre and takes lodgings in a small inn. Gray has a great interest in the supernatural, particularly vampires. He's barely settled in when he feels a sinister force descending upon him. In the night, an old man enters his room to tell him she must not die. One of the old man's daughters, Leonie, has been bitten by a vampire. In order to break the curse, Gray and Leonie's sister Giselle must find the original vampire and drive a stake through her heart. So basically, it's more or less, it is very much a vampire movie, but it operates a lot more on supernatural, just more generally supernatural, or even ghost story kind of traditions rather than explicitly vampire as we think of them exactly.
Right.
It's a lot more about what I assume the Isle of the Dead also is kind of about, is more of an undead quality rather than the you get bit and this happens. It's not that doesn't happen in these movies. It's just that's not the main focus.
It doesn't seem like, at least for Americans, that vision of vampires, what you just described, was canonized by the 31 Dracula, and that started that tradition.
This being made in Denmark
and
sort of Germany, too, was very much more of that kind of... Yeah, and it's weird because I remember a lot of this movie in the daytime. It feels like there's a lot of light in the movie, which is strange, at least in memory, because it's it's a nighttime. It should be a nighttime thing. So that's automatically something that's weirder about it. But you kind of mentioned it. I've said this a bunch about this movie. It's the only movie I've ever seen, I feel like, that totally adequately expresses the feeling of what it's like to have a dream. Every image in the movie feels like it's disjointed or it's weird. Specifically, the climax is I can't even describe it. I remember it pretty well about what it is. But I'm literally if I tried to describe that to somebody, it wouldn't even be unbelievable like crazy. They just wouldn't understand what I'm talking about, just like literally.
Yeah.
So it's a really, and it does have dialogue, but it is still mostly silent. That's what I kind of love about that very early era of sound movie, is that it's not afraid to use sound, but it also doesn't rely on it that heavily either. But yeah, some of the imagery in this movie is unlike anything I've ever seen, especially for any horror movie. So I know you're really going to enjoy it because it's really good.
I have high expectations, and I'm sure they're going to live up to it. Isle of the Dead, again, is 1945.
It's a Val Lewton movie.
Yeah, Val Lewton produced it and also is an uncredited writer on it, apparently. Just to, let me just read a quick letterbox summary of it because Wikipedia's got a little bit of a longer thing about it. But one of the biggest things about it is Boris Karloff is the lead. So obviously he's a horror icon. On a Greek island during the 1912 war, several people are trapped by quarantine for the plague. If that isn't enough worry, one of the people, a superstitious old peasant, suspects a young woman of being a vampiric demon. So again, it does kind of come from almost an undead/zombie kind of vibe or thing. Yeah. But again, it being kind of a... I've always heard this movie's pretty good. I know it's got a reputation, especially being a Boris Karloff/Val Lewton production that comes with a lot of pedigree from that era.
Mm-hmm. He had, of course, been also in The Body Snatcher, the Robert Wise film, which I think is really, really good. I've talked about that movie quite a bit here and there. And then just in general, as far as other Val Lewton productions, Cat People, I know you've seen, is really good. But my favorite is I Walk with a Zombie, I think is really great.
Yeah.
And that's a movie that's very complicated, too, because it's using all this voodoo imagery. But I feel like it's actually saying some interesting things about slavery that maybe aren't always the most politically correct, but are very progressive for the time, especially. Also, another movie I think is actually really pretty good is Curse of the Cat People, which is the sequel to Cat People, which is a lot more of like a family drama.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's one of the weirder sequels I've ever seen. I don't really want to describe a whole lot about it, but it's not exactly a horror movie. It's more fantasy, but it is pretty weird. But Val Lewton's movies that I've seen are like a really great antidote to the 1940s Universal movies, because those movies got bogged down being this comic booky, we're getting all the monsters together and look at what we can do here. And this is like, let's just make some really great horror movies that are pretty creepy and strange. I mean, one of the scariest kind of low-key things I've ever seen in the movies, the climax of The Body Snatcher, I think about all the time. And am shocked was in a movie back then.
Yeah.
And stuff from Cat People also, and some really creepy stuff from I Walk with a Zombie. But anyway, so I'm looking forward to this one, because even just the what it's about is kind of a different part of the world, sort of being Greece, kind of just before World War I. I feel like there's a lot of interesting kind of ideas there. So we'll see.
It also says director Martin Scorsese placed Isle of the Dead on his list of 11 scariest horror films of all time. I know he was a fan of, I think, the Lewton movies in general. So again, I'm excited for us to get to our Spooktober Spooktacular, third edition, or third annual.
Who are you going to go as for Halloween this year, Kyle?
You know, I kind of wanted to go as I was talking about this with my girlfriend, who were maybe dressing up together at some point. She really wants to go as Betty Draper, and so she wants me to go as another Mad Men character. I was really wanting to go as a mashup between Macho Man Randy Savage and Frankenstein's monster, like an undead, resurrected Macho Man Randy Savage. But so it's like it would be a combo of the makeup and the look. I think that'd be kind of a cool thing. But I might go as season 6 King Cosgrove, which if you've seen Mad Men, you know what that means. But what about you?
You want to guess what I'm going to go at?
I don't even want to take a guess.
Giuseppe Petti.
Should have known. At the very end, he's the horror movie villain of this one. It's like last moment,
No, I don't know.
There's actually not like a lot of horror movies, I don't think, on the horizon going to come out. There's that Exorcist.
Yeah,
movie,
I'm vaguely interested. I know nobody else cares, but I'm kind of like, yeah, why not? You know, let's do another one. Like, why not? But
I really wanted to see Talk to Me. I heard that
Yeah.
was good, but I think it's already out of theaters now.
We'll get to it one of these days.
Then there's The Haunting in Venice, which I think is actually a very creative addition to those Perot movies that Brana's doing. But
maybe I'll go as the seeing woman in mirror, he turns in trailer moment.
Yeah.
I'll go as that. How's that possible? I have no clue.
Yeah. Oh, they're going to be, we've been talking about, just me and you, like, they're re-releasing The Birds in theaters soon, and we're going to go see that. I think that's maybe November,
Did they do
though.
Christine yet?
Yeah, they did. I was busy that week. I thought about going because I didn't.
Well,
I've
you've not seen
it.
that? Yeah, I have. So. It's all right, but I have a lot of specific thoughts on that movie that I'm not going to air right now.
I know Levi has been wanting. I'll go and tell you, we're not going to do it on the pod, but we might have some thoughts about it though too in a Blue Plate special soon. Levi's been finally got the nerve to maybe watch Blair Witch Project, which I know.
Gonna have to be first thing in the morning.
But, yeah,
so. Now I won't sleep for a week. But
there's a chance we might come back with that soon, just in the Blue Plate special and
maybe.
talk about it. But
yeah, we talked a lot about it last episode, and I hadn't even seen it. But yeah.
This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.